Chapter 99. The headmaster was in the academy. Ning Chen was so shocked that he was speechless. 1,000 years had passed. Was the headmaster still alive? But he had never heard of anyone who could live for more than 1,000 years, not even an innate expert. He did not know how long an innate expert could live in this world. 300 years, 400 years, or 500 years. But it was definitely not 1,000 years. Moreover, the headmaster did not have the aura of a warrior. No matter when, there was no sign that the headmaster had practiced martial arts. Not 1,000 years ago, not 1,000 years later. On the other hand, the headmaster was really old. He was so old that he was like an ordinary old man with one foot in the grave. The feeling of having one foot in the grave could not be deceived. He even felt that the headmaster could not live for more than 10 years. He could not understand. If the headmaster of the academy was really the headmaster, then how did he survive the past 1,000 years? He could see that the headmaster was struggling. He was like an ordinary old man who was fighting against time and refused to leave. Why was the headmaster holding on so bitterly? Ning Chen could not figure it out. He tried to pick up the paper on the table to see what was going on. However, as soon as his hand touched it, the paper quickly turned to ash. Although the headmaster's brush and ink helped the paper resist the erosion of time, it had reached its limit. After all, the human body was contaminated with too much of the aura of the mortal world. The paper, which had been close to the boundary point, could not bear it anymore. Ning Chen sighed in his heart and turned to leave. It seemed that he had to go back to the academy and ask the headmaster himself when he had time. Chirp, chirp, suddenly, a series of shocking cries sounded in the sky. Ning Chen's expression changed instantly. His figure flashed and he rushed to where little Mingyu was. He covered a distance of 1,000 feet in the blink of an eye. He saw the giant ape grab a huge stone and throw it into the sky. In the dark sky, the huge stone hit one of the strange birds. It screamed miserably and a lot of feathers fell. However, there were too many strange birds and they were too strong. It was not a problem that the giant ape could solve with 1 or 2 stones. Okay, you protect little Mingyu. Leave the rest to me. Ning Chen looked up at the dark sky and narrowed his eyes slightly. Wu, the giant ape, responded with a trace of fear. Useless. The headmaster taught you for 10 years in vain. As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Chen stomped his foot and turned into a silver light that shot into the sky. In the next moment, the sword light tore through the sky, drawing a black brilliance in the 9 heavens. Then, blood sprayed out and a large amount of blood sprinkled down. Warriors below the Xiantian realm couldn't stay in the air for a long time. As Ning Chen landed, he stepped on the body of a strange bird. Then, he rose up again and flew towards the highest flying strange bird in the sky. This was the strange bird that he had slashed earlier. Its feathers were still stained with blood, but its wounds were gradually healing at an astonishing speed. Chirp! The leader of the strange birds in the sky screamed. The 4 strange birds circling around it immediately swooped down and crashed into the humans in the sky. A flying feather, a sword of heaven and earth. In the dazzling silver light, Ning Chen turned into a huge silver sword and pierced through the bodies of the 2 strange birds. The black sword condensed into frost and cut through the sky, illuminating the entire sky. Whoosh! There was a terrifying cry as one of the strange bird leader's wings was chopped off by the black sword. Blood sprayed out like rain. The leader of the strange birds could no longer support itself with a broken wing. It screamed miserably and then quickly fell down. The rest of the strange birds panicked and flew towards their leader in large groups. In a panic, they used their bodies to support the latter and hurriedly escaped. However, at this moment, Ning Chen's sword arrived again. He stepped on the body of the strange bird leader and cut open the other wing. Fresh blood splattered all over the strange birds below. Their screams became more and more panicked. They flapped their huge wings with all their might, desperately trying to escape. Ning Chen's cold eyes showed no mercy. The dark yellow light around his body flickered and the chi of thick earth exploded. With a heavy kick, he kicked the leader of the strange birds down. The strange birds below couldn't bear the sudden weight. They screamed in fear and helplessness as they watched their leader fall and crash onto the ground. "It's your turn." Ning Chen snorted coldly and used the momentum to land on the body of a strange bird. His sword pierced through the bird's body and directly stabbed into its back. In the next moment, the black sword slashed across the strange bird's body and directly cut it in half. Seeing this miserable situation, the rest of the strange birds couldn't bear the fear in their hearts and frantically fled. They were afraid that if they were a little slower, they would end up being cut into pieces. Ning Chen landed from the sky and didn't chase after them. This warning was enough. He couldn't kill all the strange birds, and there was no need to. Of the two strange birds, one was dead and one was injured. The injured one was breathing out more than it was breathing in. Its wings were chopped off and it fell from such a high altitude. It was already dead. Beside the ancient pond, little Mingyu was well protected by the giant ape. Not a single drop of blood was stained on her. This made Ning Chen very satisfied. Woo! Seeing the terrifying human walking over, the giant ape didn't just express its submission. There was also a trace of struggle in its eyes. The giant ape was too tall, so Ning Chen didn't notice it. He took little Mingyu and was about to leave. Woo! The wild desire finally won over the fear. The giant ape nervously stopped the two and glanced at the strange birds in the distance with a pleading expression. Ning Chen stopped and frowned. He didn't understand what was going on. Little Mingyu seemed to understand a little. She pulled the former's sleeve and pointed at the strange bird. "It seems like it wants something from the big strange bird." Woo woo. The giant ape nodded. Ning Chen thought for a moment and walked forward with little Mingyu. He raised his head and asked, "Where is it?" The giant ape pointed at the strange bird's head. The nervousness on its face became even more intense. "Mingyu, step back," Ning Chen said softly. "Okay." Mingyu obediently took a few steps back. Ning Chen reached out and touched the strange bird's head. He sent his true chi into it. A moment later, his eyes narrowed. It could actually sense spiritual chi. Swish! He unsheathed his ink sword and cut open the strange bird's head. As blood sprayed out, a walnut-sized green bead flew out. Ning Chen went forward and grabbed it. He looked at it carefully but couldn't find anything. He then casually tossed it to the big guy. "Take it." Woo woo. The giant ape's nervous expression instantly turned into joy. It took the bead and ate it without saying anything. "What is that?" Little Mingyu was disgusted and asked with a strange expression. "I also don't know." Ning Chen shook his head. He couldn't see anything special about it. It was like a condensation of spiritual chi. He had never heard of such a thing. The probability of it appearing should be very small. No wonder this strange bird's body was so sturdy. It was obviously about to become a spirit. Roar! At this moment, the giant ape suddenly looked up and roared. Its entire body emitted a green light, and then it quickly shrank. 30 meters, 20 meters, 15 meters, the light became brighter and brighter. The giant ape also shrank until it was about the same height as little Mingyu. Then, it gradually stopped. After shrinking, the giant ape didn't look so ugly and funny anymore. Instead, it looked much cuter. Little Mingyu's eyes bloomed with joy. She reached out and patted the giant ape's head. She was very surprised. Ning Chen couldn't figure it out, but he didn't think too much about it. The teacher could live for 1,000 years. What was so strange about this? "Let's go." Ning Chen held little Mingyu's hand. After such a long delay, they still had to hurry on. Mingyu reluctantly looked at the giant ape and followed with small steps. Woo woo. The giant ape grabbed the corner of the little girl's clothes and followed them. Ning Chen stopped and frowned again. He asked, "You want to go with us?" Woo. The giant ape nodded, looking uneasy. Ning Chen looked at little Mingyu and sighed in his heart. Wasn't it just raising a monkey? As long as little Mingyu was happy. Follow if you want. After saying that, Ning Chen held little Mingyu's hand and continued walking. The giant ape was delighted and followed them. Mingyu was in a good mood. She said sweetly, "Let's give it a name." Xiao Huang. Ning Chen said casually. Mingyu pursed her lips. She was a little dissatisfied, but she still accepted the name. Xiao Huang it was. It was a little unpleasant to hear, but it was easy to remember. After the two people and the ape left, the stone house outside the waterfall finally couldn't withstand the continuous shaking and collapsed. It completely buried the traces of the teacher's life. The cold night was still a little cold. The bright moon hung high in the sky, sprinkling the cold water on the ground. After going around the big waterfall, there was an endless mountain range. The Chizhou mountain range was very big. If they wanted to cross it, they would have to cross at least 2 mountains. They were not even halfway there. There was less than 2 hours before dawn. After walking for a while, little Mingyu became sleepy and fell asleep on Ning Chen's back. Ning Chen didn't stop and continued walking. The little ape followed behind him. They walked lightly, not daring to disturb the little girl who was sleeping soundly. The second mountain range was much bigger than the first. The moment Ning Chen set foot on it, he felt a little uneasy. A martial artist's perception was much more sensitive than ordinary people. This feeling was as if he was being watched by something terrifying. He was at the peak of the 8th rank. Something that could make him feel uneasy was at least equivalent to the 8th rank of a human, or even higher. The little ape also became restless. It looked left and right but couldn't find anything. Ning Chen walked forward silently. He became more and more alert. With little Mingyu beside him, he didn't dare to be careless. In the sea of qi in his dantian, the silver cyclone and the dark yellow cyclone rotated at the same time. Traces of vital essence flowed out and formed an invisible net around 3 steps, guarding against any accidents. The little ape's restlessness calmed down a little. It followed behind, still looking left and right carefully. After walking for more than an hour, the bright moon hanging high in the sky gradually set. The first ray of dawn was just about to arrive. The moment when night and day alternated, the world around them changed instantly. A big crack suddenly opened in the shaking world. It was like the mouth of a giant beast, swallowing the 2 people and the ape above. The next moment, the crack closed with a bang. The world returned to normal. The cold wind blew and the fallen leaves danced. In the blink of an eye, all traces were covered. It was as if nothing had happened. Chapter 100. The wind whistled past his ears and his body fell faster and faster. At this critical moment, Ning Chen pulled out his black sword and stabbed it into the stone wall in front of him, stopping his fall. The little ape hugged the former's leg and barely managed to stop its body. Ning Chen looked down and saw that it was so dark that he couldn't see the end of it. The path above was sealed and the bottom was so deep that he couldn't see the end. It was really difficult to go up and down. Little Mingyu was also awakened by this sudden movement. Looking at the darkness around her, she subconsciously hugged the only thing she could rely on. "I'm here. It'll be fine." Ning Chen comforted her gently. "Okay." Mingyu hugged him even tighter. "Hold on tight. We're going down." As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Chen pulled out the sword that was stuck in the stone wall, and his body fell down again. Just like this, Ning Chen would use his black sword to slow down his fall every few dozen feet. Little Mingyu was protected by his true qi and was safe. After a long time, the two finally reached the ground. The little ape also obediently stayed on the side and watched. It didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Ning Chen took out a match and blew on it. He saw a path in front of him with the light. This was the only path. Ning Chen walked forward. After walking for a while, he gradually saw a light far away. It was very clear, but it wasn't the light of the sun. It was the unique spiritual light of a martial artist. He was also a martial artist, so he wasn't unfamiliar with this kind of light. However, this kind of invisible pressure faintly suppressed any powerhouse he had ever seen. Ning Chen was very shocked. How could there be such a powerhouse in this kind of place? There was no doubt that this person was at least one of the 5 strongest Xiantian powerhouses in the world. He might even surpass them. The spiritual light coming from the distance was very peaceful. It didn't have the slightest bit of evil. It was like a calm ocean, boundless and containing all things. Ning Chen continued to walk forward. He wanted to see exactly who this person was. If a powerhouse of this level had evil intentions, they wouldn't even have a chance to escape. It didn't matter if it was far or near. After 100 steps, the space suddenly changed. Everything around Ning Chen changed. Even Mingyu and the little ape disappeared. In front of him, a purple guqin was playing by itself. The formless sound of the great Tao spread out in circles, silently cleansing the souls of those who entered. An illusion. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes as he looked at the zither in front of him. The same situation had happened to him in the Great Hall of the Netherworld. It was very strange, and people couldn't tell if it was real or fake. In the end, the little white horse swallowed something to save him. In the state of consciousness, everything you see is real. Just at this moment, a violet-robed youth slowly walked out and sat by the zither, gently stroking its strings. Ning Chen was startled. Was this that powerful cultivator? At such a close distance, he didn't feel that formless pressure. "Senior, may I ask where this place is?" Ning Chen stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "In the belly of a Taotai." The purple-clothed young man stopped playing the zither and raised his head to answer calmly. "Taotai," Ning Chen frowned. Wasn't this a mythical monster? It actually existed. Legend has it that the Taotai was one of the sons of the dragon. It was extremely greedy and gluttonous and could devour everything in the world. It was a monster that had only appeared in ancient myths and legends. "Can you let me see the heavenly book in your body?" At this moment, the purple-clothed young man spoke. Ning Chen's body trembled. How could this person know that he had a heavenly book? The purple-clothed young man smiled faintly and said, "No need to be surprised. 1,000 years ago, I also had a heavenly book, so I'm more sensitive to its aura." Hearing this, Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. 1,000 years ago again? Didn't that mean that this person had also lived for 1,000 years? "May I ask for Senior's name?" Ning Chen bowed respectfully again and asked. "Jiang Wangji." The purple-clothed young man thought for a moment and softly replied. It had been too long since anyone had asked for his name, so he had forgotten it. "Dao Kuei." Ning Chen's heart trembled. The person in front of him was the head of the Dao sect from 1,000 years ago. The Dao sect had existed for much longer than the Confucian sect. It could even be compared to the Eternal Night sect. However, it had been destroyed 1,000 years ago, and its orthodoxy had ended. Once, the Book of Moon in the Heavenly Book belonged to the Dao sect. After the Dao sect was destroyed, the Book of Moon also disappeared. It only reappeared 100 years ago and was obtained by the Eternal Night sect. It would be a lie to say that he was not shocked to meet such an old antique here. However, with the cultivation of the person in front of him, there was really no need for him to lie. Ning Chen no longer had any doubts. He activated his internal energy, and the cyclone in his dantian rotated. 2 broken pages of the heavenly book slowly flew out and floated in front of him. Book of Life, Book of Earth. Jian Wenji's knowledge was extraordinary. He could tell the origin of the heavenly book at a glance. He was not too surprised. Everyone had their own opportunities. Obtaining 2 heavenly books could only mean that the young man in front of him was luckier than the average person. Ning Chen took back the 2 heavenly books. He finally knew the name of the other heavenly book. Book of Earth. It was much more impressive than the Book of Dust. Is the headmaster still alive? Jian Wenji suddenly asked. Ning Chen's expression froze, and then he felt relieved. Dao Kuei and the headmaster were from the same era. It was not strange that they knew each other. He should be alive, but I am still not sure, Ning Chen answered honestly. Jian Wenji thought for a while and said, he should be in a place called Tiansang Academy. 1,000 years ago, he told me that he was going to build such an academy. At this moment, Ning Chen was finally 100% sure that the old headmaster in the academy was the headmaster from 1,000 years ago. If so, the headmaster is still alive. However, I have a feeling that the headmaster may not be able to hold on for more than 10 years, Ning Chen said seriously. Sigh. Jian Wenji sighed softly. Even someone as amazing as the headmaster could not withstand the merciless passage of time. 1,000 years is too long. Ning Chen hesitated for a moment. He could no longer suppress the doubts in his heart and asked, Senior, can a human really live for more than 1,000 years? Impossible. Jian Wenji shook his head. Then he looked at the space around him and continued, do you know why I am voluntarily trapped in this place? Senior, please tell me, Ning Chen said respectfully. Because in the stomach of the Tao Tai, the flow of time is slower than outside. I am not as good as the headmaster, so I can only use this method to survive this long 1,000 years. As for the headmaster's method, you will not understand it, and you don't need to understand it. However, any method of immortality has a price. No one is an exception. Jian Wenji's voice was filled with endless exhaustion. Even though he was in the stomach of the Tao Tai, he could not hold on any longer. 1,000 years had already exhausted him. Ning Chen's eyes were filled with shock and confusion. Senior and the headmaster did not seem like people who were afraid of death. Why did they have to hold on so bitterly and live through this 1,000 years that was worse than death? I know you have doubts, but I can't say it now. Otherwise, it will cause unnecessary changes. The headmaster and I can't hold on for much longer. There can't be any more accidents. As soon as he finished speaking, Jian Wenji got up and walked to the front of the young man in front of him. He stretched out his right hand and gently touched the young man's forehead. Immediately, a Haotian Taoism cultivation method was reflected in his mind. I know that the life scroll only has mental cultivation methods and no moves. The moves recorded in this cultivation method are the most suitable Haotian Taoism secret method besides the original forbidden move in the life scroll. I don't have many requests. I just hope that you can live well, live at all costs. Then, try your best to find the nothing scroll. Remember, don't tell anyone that the headmaster and I are alive. As for the way out, just go back the way you came. In a while, I will disturb the Taotia's senses again and make it think that it is time to eat. When it opens its mouth, you rush out immediately. I will also help you. As he spoke, the surrounding space suddenly shattered. The purple figure also turned into stars and disappeared between heaven and earth. Ning Chen came to his senses and found that little Mingyu had been guarding him worriedly. Her little hands were tightly grasped, for fear that he would disappear if she could not hold him. Time was of the essence. Ning Chen did not have time to say more. He held little Mingyu in his arms and rushed back the way they came. The little ape beast roared and quickly followed after him. The next moment, the spiritual light of the martial artist behind him became brighter, like a purple sun. Ning Chen knew that this was the senior interfering with the Taotia's senses. Rumble. Suddenly, the earth shook. In the sky ahead, a huge mouth opened. A bright light shone down. It was extremely bright. It was the first light of dawn. Let's go. Ning Chen's aura exploded. He rolled up the little ape and turned into a stream of light that soared into the sky. At the same time, a vast power appeared out of thin air. A soft palm rushed over and helped him escape from the Taotia's stomach. After Ning Chen left, the huge gully quickly closed. In the deepest part of the Taotia's stomach, Jiang Wangji looked at the slowly disappearing sunlight in the distance and sighed softly. He had not seen this kind of warm light for a long time. He was a person from 1,000 years ago. He could no longer see the light. His existence was no longer tolerated by heaven and earth. Once he went out, he would soon disappear. He had waited for 1,000 years, hoping that he could catch up. This young man was not bad. Not everyone could listen to the soul-leaving song of Haotian Taoism. He was fine, which meant that his nature was not bad. He was not greedy and not arrogant. He was a trustworthy person. For 1,000 years, those who were swallowed by the Taotai had basically died. Even if they did not die, in the end, no one could pass the test of the soul-leaving song. Human greed was essentially no different from the Taotai. He had no time to wait. Fortunately, he had found one at the last moment. The no scroll was too important. He had to find it as soon as possible. Otherwise, this disaster would become a real catastrophe. Only those who had the tomes of arcane would have a special reaction to the tomes of arcane. The no scroll represented nothingness and destruction. It was the key to facing the disaster in the future. He and the headmaster were too old to stop this disaster. He only hoped that these young people 1,000 years later could shoulder this burden. The headmaster's divination skill was unparalleled. He believed that the headmaster said that there would be hope in the human world. Chapter 101. Under the first light of dawn, a silver light rushed out from the ground. After landing, it continued to run for more than 10 miles before stopping. The morning sun was a little dazzling. Little Mingyu took a while to adjust to it before opening her eyes. She looked around and saw that she was back on the ground. She couldn't help but smile. The little ape stayed aside with lingering fear. Its big round eyes looked sneaky, afraid that it would fall into that dark and strange place again. Ning Chen didn't explain anything. In fact, he was a little confused. If it wasn't for the Taoist secret method in his mind, he would have suspected that this was another illusion. Dao Kuei, Jiang Wangji, who had disappeared 1,000 years ago, actually lived to this era. What was he waiting for? He didn't hesitate to pay such a big price to survive 1,000 years. Was it worth it? Go by yourself. Ning Chen put little Mingyu down and held her little hand as he spoke softly. Okay, Mingyu said obediently. Not long after, Ning Chen heard the sound of the river, so he took little Mingyu there to rest for a while. After a tiring night, he was fine, but little Mingyu couldn't fall asleep several times. She probably couldn't take it anymore. The river was turbulent and very clear. There was no human habitation in the primitive land, so the river water was very clean. Ning Chen caught a fish, roasted it, and handed it to little Mingyu. The little girl ate one, and then fell asleep in the former's arms after eating it. The little ape stayed aside and didn't eat anything. Since it swallowed the bead of the strange bird, its appetite for food had been greatly reduced. After little Mingyu fell asleep, Ning Chen calmed down and carefully sorted out the Taoist secret method in his mind. Taoism had existed for more than 10,000 years, and its methods had been perfected by generations of sages. It could be said that the methods of Taoism were the closest to the tomes of arcane in the world. Dao Kuei was the strongest person 1,000 years ago. It could be said that he single-handedly supported Taoism. After Dao Kuei disappeared, Taoism was quickly destroyed. Taoism was destroyed, and Confucianism was flourishing. Jiang Wangji and the headmaster did the best to resist the eternal night cult. The secret method that Dao Kuei passed on to him didn't require the primordial realm like the scroll of earth, but it still required him to be at least at the peak of the 9th rank. He couldn't practice it now. This was the wisdom of Taoism over the past 10,000 years. He needed to be patient. Moreover, he hadn't fully grasped the things that the old Marquis had taught him. He still understood the principle of biting off more than he could chew. Little Mingyu was exhausted. She slept all the way until noon. The little ape picked a lot of wild fruits. After a simple meal, the two of them continued their journey. For the rest of the journey, they did not encounter any danger. Ning Chen sped up again and finally walked out of the Chizhou mountain range when the cold moon hung high in the sky. From this moment on, they had finally stepped into the heart of the Central Plains and were not far from Fan Lingyue's army. Ning Chen's mood also started to become heavy. In this world, the person he was most unwilling to face was Fan Lingyue. This woman was too intelligent, too ruthless, and almost had no weaknesses. He didn't know if little Mingyu could become Fan Lingyue's weakness, but he still had to try. Although it was despicable, this was war. There was no reason to speak of. Since the beginning of this war, Emperor Xia had already gone insane. In order to completely draw out the internal problems, he had actually let the wolf into the house and watched as Yengui's city was broken. It was hard to believe that such a stupid thing would happen to an emperor. He had heard before that time could turn a wise emperor into a fatuous one and a tyrant. When one grew old, the desire for power would become even stronger and the suspicion in one's heart would also become heavier. It wasn't that there were no examples in the history of Wuxia, but no one was as extreme as Emperor Xia. At that time, he really hoped that Emperor Xia had died on that mountain, even if Great Xia would be in chaos for a while. If Emperor Xia died, Great Xia would be in chaos. If he didn't die, Great Xia would be even more chaotic. The current situation of Great Xia was much worse than before. If it wasn't for Zhangsun, he really didn't want to get involved in this mess. Whoever ruled the world had nothing to do with him. In terms of closeness, little Mingyu was much more suitable than Emperor Xia, who had always wanted to kill him. Fan Lingyue's army of 300,000 shouldn't have advanced too far. With such a big thing happening in the northern Meng imperial court, it was impossible to hide it. The hearts of the northern Meng army was the first thing that had to be resolved. After all, Great Xia had been invincible for 1,000 years. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. The cities in the Central Plains were connected one after another. It wasn't that easy to attack the imperial city. The cruelest war had just begun. Once Fan Lingyue swept away all the troubles and went all out south, Great Xia would be in real danger. Whether or not they could stop Fan Lingyue before he reached the imperial city was the key to Great Xia's survival. In any dynasty, once the imperial city was breached, it wouldn't be far from destruction. This was the spiritual sustenance of the people of the dynasty. It didn't just represent a simple city. He kidnapped little Mingyu and only temporarily delayed the northern Meng army's advance to the south, giving Great Xia a chance to breathe. As for threatening Fan Lingyue to retreat, even he himself didn't believe it. The reason was simple. She was the military advisor. She was even more ruthless than Emperor Xia. The only difference was that Emperor Xia's ruthlessness had buried the north of Great Xia, while Fan Lingyue had mercilessly taken down the north of Great Xia. In this world, the difference between a smart person and a stupid person was much greater than one could imagine. Now, he had already confirmed that the Academy's teacher was the same teacher from 1,000 years ago. Therefore, the first thing he had to do was to return to the Academy. In this world, if there was anyone whose intelligence could match Fan Lingyue, it would be his teacher. The road back to the Academy was very long. Ning Chen brought little Mingyu and rushed for 2 days before they arrived. The first person he went to see wasn't his teacher, but Mr. Lu. He brought along a jar of wine that he had bought on the street. There was a imperial word on it. Old man Lu was so angry that he was fuming. This brat had said before he left that he would bring back imperial wine for him. This time, he actually brought back imperial wine. He was grateful to his whole family. Ning Chen didn't feel any shame. Emperor Xia was chasing him all over the world. Where could he get the real imperial wine for old man Lu? Take it or leave it. If you don't want it, I'll drink it myself, Ning Chen said impatiently. Of course I want it. Why wouldn't I? I can't let a little bastard like you benefit from it. Old man Lu snatched the jar of wine and casually threw it to the side. It was his business whether he drank it or not, but he definitely had to leave the wine behind. This is the little emperor of northern Meng. Old man Lu glanced at the delicate little boy beside Ning Chen and asked curiously. Yes. Ning Chen patted little Ming Yu's little hat and said, call me Mr. Lu. Mr. Lu. Ming Yu obediently called out. Old man Lu nodded and said with a strange expression, looks like you two get along well. Of course, I've always been very popular. Ning Chen laughed. All right, the wine is here. I have to go. Next time, I might bring you the real imperial wine. After saying this, Ning Chen held little Ming Yu's hand and walked out of the courtyard. He had come here to tell old man Lu that he was safe. When his legs had just been crippled, this old man had treated him well. He couldn't be ungrateful. Old man Lu looked at Ning Chen's back and shook his head helplessly. This kid was really not easy to deal with. After seeing Mr. Lu, Ning Chen returned to his old residence in the academy. The little white horse had grown fat and had also grown up. When the two met, there was no awkward silence, nor were there tears in their eyes. The little white horse wanted to express its longing, but was pushed away by Ning Chen. He hated horses that didn't care about hygiene the most. Little Mingyu had fallen asleep in the house. After rushing for a few days, the little girl was a little tired. After arriving at the academy, her spirit wasn't too good. Xiao Huang, you stay here with little white. Don't fight. Do whatever you want. Ning Chen also left the little ape behind. Why was there always a monkey beside him? The little ape didn't dare to object and could only smile at the little white horse to show its friendliness. The little white horse proudly turned its head away, showing its disdain. Ning Chen didn't care how they got along. If they had the ability, he would tear down the academy. The academy had an innate stage principle. No matter how arrogant a monster was, he would be able to slap it down. The headmaster's residence wasn't far from here. He used to walk slowly and had to walk for a long time. Now, he could get there in a short while. However, at the headmaster's residence, he saw a person he really didn't expect. The imperial preceptor of the great Xia dynasty, the head of the Confucian sect, and the Grand Advisor. The Grand Advisor stood beside the headmaster with a respectful expression, following the rules of the Confucian sect and performing the etiquette of a disciple. When Ning Chen came in, neither of them were surprised, as if they already knew that he was coming. The headmaster was as old as usual, like an ordinary old man in his twilight years. There was nothing special about him. Headmaster, Ning Chen bowed and said respectfully. The headmaster nodded and said, "How was the journey to the north?" "I gained a lot," Ning Chen stood up and replied. "Ask whatever you want," the headmaster said slowly as he tidied up the rice paper on the table. "Are you the headmaster?" Ning Chen asked seriously. "Yes," the headmaster nodded and said. Ning Chen was shocked. Although he was already prepared, when he heard the headmaster admit it, he still felt that it was unbelievable. "How many people in the world know about this?" Ning Chen asked. "4," the headmaster said calmly. Ning Chen thought for a while. There were 3 people present. The other person, if he guessed correctly, should be the dean of the academy. Will the great Xia dynasty be destroyed? Ning Chen asked another question. Yes, the headmaster nodded. Ning Chen's body suddenly trembled. This was the result. But if the headmaster said that the great Xia dynasty would be destroyed, then the great Xia dynasty would definitely be destroyed. The people of the Confucian sect cultivated the great righteousness and were good at seeking luck and avoiding misfortune. Although the headmaster didn't practice martial arts, he was the best in the art of divination. The reason was simple. The entire Confucian sect was founded by the headmaster, and the art of divination was no exception. Is there a way to avoid it? Ning Chen asked unwillingly. Try your best, the headmaster said. How? Ning Chen asked for advice. Stop the war in the world. The headmaster only said 4 words. The meaning was obvious and there was no mystery. Ning Chen still didn't quite understand. He knew that the headmaster wouldn't say useless words. Was the destruction of the great Xia dynasty not in this war? Chapter 102. The headmaster did not explain further. He had said what he needed to say. The rest was up to the younger generation. What would happen in the future was up to these young people to decide. There was not much he could do. At this moment, the Grand Advisor, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said, Ning Chen, can the young Emperor of Northern Meng be handed over to the imperial court? Impossible. Ning Chen was stunned and immediately refused without hesitation. The Grand Advisor looked solemn and said righteously, the young Emperor of Northern Meng is of great importance. I hope you can consider it seriously. As long as you are willing to cooperate, it is not impossible for you to be made a Marquis in the future. Say no more. There is nothing to discuss. The young Emperor can only be in my hands. No one else can. Ning Chen refused again. His attitude was unquestionable. He did not trust anyone in the imperial court, especially Emperor Xiao. He had promised little Mingyu that he would not hand her over to anyone else. He had to keep his word. After Mingyu came to Great Xia, he was the only one she could rely on. If he let go, how could a 7-year-old girl live? As long as he was not dead, there was no room for discussion. The Grand Advisor frowned and said patiently, the young Emperor will not be of any use in your hands. The imperial court will be the one to negotiate. You can't make a promise and can't decide anything. Ning Chen did not speak. The Grand Advisor was telling the truth. If they wanted to negotiate with Northern Meng, only the imperial court would be the most suitable. Seeing that the young man in front of him did not speak, the Grand Advisor continued, listen to me. Hand over the young Emperor. Only in this way can Great Xia have more time to breathe. Since you are willing to risk your life to break into the palace of Northern Meng, you must not want to see Great Xia lose this war. Ning Chen did not want to refute. He looked calmly at the leader of the Confucian sect in front of him and asked, Grand Advisor, I know you are the leader of the Confucian sect and you also know that the Confucian sect values morality the most. I want to ask, I have already promised the young emperor that I will not hand him over to anyone. Tell me, is Great Xia more important or the promise more important? The Grand Advisor's expression froze. He could not answer. Reason told him that compared to a personal promise, the foundation of Great Xia was of course more important. But he was the leader of the Confucian sect. How could he persuade someone to go back on their word? The headmaster listened quietly at the side. His old face remained calm, without any ripples. After a long time, he finally made up his mind and said in a deep voice, follow me back to the palace to meet His Majesty. I will persuade His Majesty to confer you the title of nobility and represent the imperial court to negotiate with the Northern Meng royal court. Ning Chen furrowed his brows. It sounded plausible, but in fact, it was impossible. He knew very well just how intense Emperor Xia's desire to kill him was. While Yi Futian's existence had always been a thorn in Emperor Xia's side, it might have only been because of the gunpowder incident in the beginning, but it was no longer so simple now. Yi Futian had escaped the pursuit of Emperor Xia time and time again, and Emperor Xia's anger had long since reached a boiling point. The majesty of an emperor had always been merciless and unreasonable. Ning Chen said seriously, "Great sage, do you really think this method will work? It is no secret that Emperor Xia wants to kill me. Who can guarantee that Emperor Xia will not have the intention to kill me after I return to the palace? Who can guarantee that eunuch Pei will not suddenly attack me? Although I am not afraid of death, I do not want to court death, especially when I have to face a temperamental emperor." The great sage did not deny it. What Ning Chen said was the truth. The current Emperor Xia had indeed become somewhat unrecognizable. "I cannot promise you anything, but I can promise you that if His Majesty wants to kill you, I will help you stop eunuch Pei." At this point, the great sage looked at Ning Chen and said with an incomparably solemn expression, "For the sake of the great Xia, I hope you can try it with me." Hearing this, Ning Chen furrowed his brows again. He was not surprised that the great sage said he could stop eunuch Pei. As the head of the Confucian sect, he had to have some trump cards. He was just a little hesitant about whether this trip was worth it. He really did not have a good impression of Emperor Xia, and he did not believe that this tyrant, who was getting more and more perverted with age, would spare him. However, the great sage's words did cause him to waver. In the end, he still did not want to see the great Xia destroyed. "I can return to the palace with you, but you must promise me that if something happens to me, you must protect the little emperor's life. Swear on the 1,000 years of reputation of the Confucian sect." Ning Chen thought for a moment, but still agreed to the great sage's suggestion. However, he also raised his own request. The great sage did not hesitate. He nodded and said, "Fine, I promise you. Since you have decided, then do it. If you have time, you can come back to the academy more often," the teacher said calmly. "Thank you for your guidance today, teacher. This junior will take his leave." Ning Chen bowed respectfully. "Teacher, this student will take his leave." The great sage took half a step back and bowed before leaving. After the two of them left, the teacher picked up his brush and slowly wrote a word on the paper. His hand trembled, but his strength penetrated the paper. When Ning Chen returned to his residence, little Mingyu was still asleep, so he sat to the side and waited. The great sage was about to speak, but he closed his mouth. He did not want to make the youth in front of him unhappy at this time. The two of them waited for more than 4 hours before little Mingyu slowly woke up. She sat up and smiled when she saw Ning Chen beside the bed. "You're awake. We should go," Ning Chen said gently as he adjusted the little girl's cloth hat. "Where are we going?" Mingyu did not understand. "The Great Xia Imperial Palace," Ning Chen said honestly. The little girl's body suddenly trembled. Her face instantly turned pale, and tears unconsciously flowed out. Ning Chen's heart ached. He gently pulled little Mingyu into his arms and comforted her. "It's okay. I'm just negotiating with Emperor Xia. It has nothing to do with you." Mingyu raised her tear-stained head and asked, "Really? Really?" Ning Chen nodded seriously. "All right, since he's awake, we should be on our way," the great sage said from the side. Only then did little Mingyu notice that there was a stranger in the room. She quickly got up from Ning Chen's arms and wiped away her tears. She did not want others to see her weak side. She was the emperor of Northern Meng and represented the entire Northern Meng court. She could not show any weakness in front of the people of Great Xia. Of course, bad people were an exception. "Do you want to walk on your own or piggyback?" Ning Chen asked softly. "I'll walk on my own," Mingyu replied. Little Mingyu reached out and grabbed his big hand. She did not even look at the great sage and walked out of the room. Ning Chen sighed. When little Mingyu was not familiar with him, she was also so proud and stubborn. Now that he thought about it, it was just a way for the little girl to protect herself. She was already an emperor before she could even remember anything. Moreover, she had to hide her identity as a girl. It was destined that little Mingyu could not show any weakness at all. In this world, the easiest thing to be an emperor was also the hardest thing to be. The academy was not far from the imperial city. If they took a carriage, they could reach it in a little more than a day. The great sage was in a hurry, but Ning Chen was not in a hurry. Because little Mingyu was still a little scared, it took them 2 days to arrive. After arriving at the imperial city, Ning Chen brought little Mingyu out of the carriage. He did not choose to enter the palace immediately. Instead, he promised the great sage that he would personally bring little Mingyu there the next morning. Seeing that the former had made up his mind, the great sage had no choice but to nod and agree. He then left in the carriage. Ning Chen randomly found an inn in the city. After paying for the room, he went upstairs directly. In the room, Ning Chen had little Mingyu sit on the bed. Then, he injected a little bit of vital energy from the life scroll into the little girl's body. There was a Khanate master in the palace. He could not be careless. The secret that little Mingyu was a girl could not be known by others. The vital energy could temporarily disturb her pulse. As long as eunuch Pei did not touch little Mingyu's body, he should not be able to tell. Mingyu, have a good rest. You may have to fight tomorrow. But I'm here. Don't be afraid, Ning Chen said softly as he rubbed the little girl's hair. Okay. Mingyu nodded and lay down obediently. Night fell. Ning Chen sat in the room and seized the time to cultivate. In his Dantian Sea of Qi, beside the 2 cyclones, a third aura gradually gathered. The blue light rolled like waves. Spiritual Qi rolled and quickly formed a very small cyclone in his Dantian Sea of Qi. In the next moment, Ning Chen forced the vital energy he had suppressed that day into the cyclone, quickly filling up the weak third cyclone. Of the 10 years of cultivation the old Marquis had given him, more than half had been consumed when he had broken through. He did not dare to continue devouring the remaining half because he was worried that his foundation would be unstable and affect his future cultivation. Now, it was the perfect time to use it to cultivate the Zhangsun branch's techniques. His talent could not be considered good. After cultivating for so many days, he could only be considered to have made some progress. In the end, the Zhangsun branch's techniques needed to be combined with the Zhangsun branch's techniques. There was no telling what would happen tomorrow. The Grand Xia's imperial palace was filled with experts, and there was not just one Khanate master. It was always good to be prepared. The spiritual qi fluctuations in the room grew stronger and stronger. The third cyclone was also constantly devouring vital energy. It was only when it was about the same size as the other 2 cyclones did it stop. However, this kind of cyclone that had not experienced any bottlenecks had an extremely unstable foundation. Once it started fighting, it would quickly consume its vital energy and its recovery speed would be much slower. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. How much effort you put in would be how much you received in return. In the end, his greatest reliance was still the life scroll. It was also the foundation of his cultivation. In the northern Meng camp, an urgent letter appeared in the commander's tent. After reading it, Fan Lingyue's eyes narrowed slightly. He had finally returned to the Grand Xia's imperial city. Men, Fan Lingyue said. Present. A heavily armored general walked in. It was the leader of the heavily armored cavalry, Qin Wuyo. Ever since Yang Hong had stayed in Heaven's Gate, the task of protecting the military advisor had fallen on him. Tell Qin Wuhan that her chance is coming soon. Remember, there is only one chance. She must not fail. Fan Lingyue said solemnly. Yes. Qin Wuyo respectfully accepted the order and immediately turned to leave. Cough cough. After Qin Wuyo left, Fan Lingyue covered his mouth and coughed violently a few times. When it landed, a bright red color appeared in his palm, so dazzling. Chapter 103. At dawn the next day, Ning Chen held Ming Yu's hand and walked towards the Xia palace. The little girl's hat covered her long hair. From afar, she looked silly, charming, and cute. The morning sun was so bright that it shone on the ground and dyed it a faint golden color. The imperial guards of the palace lined up from the south gate to the front of the heavenly mandate hall. Their armor clanged, and every one of them exuded an intimidating aura. They were the most elite soldiers of the Xia dynasty. Ming Yu was a little nervous. Her little hand held the big hand beside her tightly, unwilling to let go for even a moment. The palace of the Xia dynasty had been invincible for thousands of years. With every step they took, they could feel the unparalleled pressure. This was something that no era or dynasty could compare to. Ning Chen and Ming Yu walked between the two rows of imperial guards. Step by step, their bodies were straight, and they never lowered their heads. One was a descendant of Wuxia, and the other was the emperor of northern Meng. Life could be lost, but dignity was priceless. In the heavenly mandate hall, Emperor Xia sat on the dragon throne. Zhongsun sat beside him, and the three dukes stood quietly below. The five most powerful people of the Xia dynasty were all gathered, waiting quietly for the two who would come. Ning Chen came, holding Ming Yu's hand. He walked slowly from afar, and the moment he stepped into the hall, the atmosphere froze. Worry flashed in Zhongsun's eyes. She should not have come today. The imperial harem should not interfere in politics. This was the rule of the ancestors. But she was really worried. Emperor Xia's attitude was the biggest variable today. No one could predict what would happen. Ning Chen looked at Zhongsun and smiled gently. He was still a little shy as usual. Zhongsun shook her head without leaving a trace, indicating that he should be careful and not be rash. At this moment, Emperor Xia said calmly from the dragon throne, Ning Chen, hand over the Emperor of Northern Meng the secret recipe of that thing, and I will let bygones be bygones. Impossible, Ning Chen refused directly. Then there is nothing to talk about, Emperor Xia said calmly. Men, arrest this traitor. Yes. As soon as he said this, two captains of the Shadow Dragon Guards appeared. There was also a huge commotion outside. Imperial guards rushed in groups and blocked the way out of the heavenly mandate hall. They blocked all escape routes. Everyone's expression changed, especially Zhongsun. She gripped her chair tightly, and there was anger in her eyes. How was this a negotiation? In the main hall, Ning Chen's eyes gradually turned cold. The real qi around his body rose, and the temperature in the main hall dropped instantly. There was no wind, and snow was falling. It was as if winter had come again. The two dark dragon guards also had grave expressions. They knew that the youth in front of them was not so easy to deal with. The two of them stood on opposite sides, secretly raising their martial arts, ready to attack. The situation was very unfavorable for Ning Chen. It was not because the two people in front of him were of the 9th rank, nor was it because there were imperial guards outside the hall. It was because he did not have a sword. Other than Prince Yan, no one else in the world could bring a sword to meet Emperor Xiao. After a moment of confrontation, the two hidden dragon guards attacked at the same time. Relying on their 9th grade cultivation, their palm force pressed over. In the first palm strike, two powerful forces moved together. Their aura swallowed the mountains and rivers, and heaven and earth lost their color. Ning Chen took a step back. His spirit shivered as he circulated the life scroll to its peak. Frost surged around his body as he flipped his left and right hands. He was fighting one against two. Ta! In the raging wind, there was an almost undetectable sound of blood falling. Looking over, blood slowly flowed from the corners of the three people's mouths. After a palm strike, they were all injured. On the dragon throne, Emperor Xia narrowed his eyes slightly. Letting the tiger return to the mountain would eventually become a big problem. The little eunuch who did not know martial arts in the past was now able to fight 2 ninth-grade hidden dragon guards. The situation was not good. Ning Chen did not want to delay any longer. He moved his palm, and the silver light faded. Blue waves rose up, and the vigorous real qi turned into huge waves. It was the secret of the Zhongsun family. The waves of the world flow to the east. The awe-inspiring might of God's descent turned the entire heavenly mandate palace blue. The huge waves pressed down like an ocean overturning. The 2 hidden dragon guards did not dare to be careless. They used their ultimate moves at the same time. Blue and white light shone brightly, and they met the shocking moves head-on. The ultimate moves collided. With a boom, the heavenly mandate palace was hit. Large pieces of stone flew up and hit the surrounding pillars, shattering all over the sky. The 3 dukes attacked together, blocking the remaining power in front of the empress. Their expressions were very serious. In the aftermath, the 2 hidden dragon guards took a few steps back. Then they groaned and vomited. The hidden dragon guards were actually defeated by this palm. Ning Chen took a step back. With a wave of his hand, he blocked all the broken stones in front of little Mingyu. A bloody taste rose up in his throat, but he forced it down. Not bad. Just at this moment, a hoarse voice sounded out. Then, an emaciated and thin figure walked out slowly. His face was old and haggard, but it caused everyone present to feel an irresistible pressure. Old Eunuch Pei. He was the true strongest in the imperial palace. The next moment, the old figure disappeared. The withered hand reached for Ning Chen. There was no technique, but there was still no way to avoid it. At this critical moment, the Grand Advisor, who was already prepared, flashed between the two. The noble qi around him surged, and his palm met old Eunuch Pei's. With a boom, the 2 of them took half a step back. It was a draw. Grand Advisor, what do you mean by this? Old Eunuch Pei frowned and asked slowly. I promised him that if you attacked, I would be responsible for stopping you, the Grand Advisor replied calmly. Eunuch Pei's frown deepened. The Grand Advisor's status was special. Ordinary officials could not compare to him. It was indeed troublesome. Teacher, is this your decision? Seated on the dragon throne, the Xia Emperor spoke calmly. The Grand Advisor looked up at the Xia Emperor, sighed softly, and said, Your Majesty, this old subject will say the same thing again. The Grand Xia needs peace, and at this time, Ning Chen is the person most likely to bring about peace. Emperor Xia did not answer. Instead, he turned his head and asked, Empress, what do you think? What Grand Advisor says is my opinion, Zhang Sun replied with a grave expression. He, very good. Emperor Xia laughed coldly. He then stood up and walked down from the high platform. He came before Mingyu, who was standing beside Ning Chen. Ning Chen has performed a meritorious service by bringing back the Northern Meng Emperor. He will be conferred the title of Jiming Marquis and be granted a residence in the imperial city. The sudden change made the 3 directors and Zhang Xuan's expressions turn cold. For a moment, they thought they had misheard. Ning Chen's eyelids twitched violently. He felt uneasy. He felt that things were not so simple. However, the imperial edict was quickly passed down. The matter was settled, and he had to believe it even if he did not want to. Emperor Xia left after giving the imperial edict. Zhang Sun could only leave with him. Before leaving, her eyes were filled with confusion and worry. When she looked at him, she signaled for him to be careful. Ning Chen nodded. After thinking for a while, he left the palace with Mingyu. In the Grand Advisor's residence, the Grand Advisor stood in front of the desk with a grave expression. He was wondering if something had gone wrong. Emperor Xia's change was too sudden. A moment ago, he had given the order to kill, and now, he had changed his mind and made him a marquis. Xia Zi arrived with an aura of righteousness. Step by step, his steps were slow and forceful. His clothes were as white as snow, and he wore a gilded crown. His hair was as black as ink, and his face was cold and stern. His back was straight, and his figure was like a divine tree that contained an unfathomable tenacity. The person who had come was none other than the first prince, who was most likely to inherit the throne. Teacher. Chu Zi bowed respectfully. He had been taught by the Grand Advisor since he was young, and he deserved to be called teacher. The Grand Advisor nodded. He was not surprised by Xia Zi's arrival. Zi, can you tell what His Majesty is up to? Xia Zi shook his head slightly and said, I can't tell for now. Father's temperament has changed greatly, and he does things differently. Other than eunuch Pei, I'm afraid no one else in the world knows what father is up to. Doubt, 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 doubt. The Grand Advisor sighed and wrote 4 words on a piece of paper. He looked at the heavenly mandate hall in the palace with a puzzled expression. What was the Emperor of Xia thinking? In Weiyang Palace, Zhang Sun was also frowning. He had been thinking for a whole day, but he still could not figure out Emperor Xia's intentions. Qin Ning stood quietly to the side. She already knew what had happened in the heavenly mandate hall. She should have been happy that Ning Chen had been made a marquis, but all signs indicated that things were not so simple. If Emperor Xia could let go of his killing intent so easily, Xia Kingdom would not have fallen to its current state. Emperor Xia was no longer the original Emperor Xia. Ever since the war between the 2 dynasties began, Emperor Xia had changed so much that no one could recognize him. Today's situation undoubtedly showed that Emperor Xia still had a strong desire to kill Ning Chen. But why did he suddenly change in the end? She still could not figure it out. The matter of Ning Chen being made a marquis was, without a doubt, a foregone conclusion. The next day, a eunuch came to the inn and led the 2 of them to the residence that Emperor Xia had bestowed upon them. Xia Kingdom had been established for thousands of years, and there were countless nobles. The titles of marquis were also innumerable. Other than the title of marquis, ordinary marquis was nothing. The residence was not small, and there were maids and servants. After a careful inspection, they could not find anything unusual. There were at least thousands of such residences in the imperial city. It was not unusual. The uneasiness in Ning Chen's heart did not dissipate. He did not believe that Emperor Xia would let him go so easily. There must be something wrong. The eunuch returned to the palace to report the edict. The marquis residence was busy but calm. Everything was so normal that it made people uncomfortable. The uneasiness in Ning Chen's heart grew more and more serious. After that, he did not let little Mingyu leave his side for even a moment. Even if the little girl ate, slept, or went to the outhouse, he did not leave her side. Mingyu could tell that Ning Chen's mood was not right. She obediently followed beside him, moving as little as possible. Night fell, and the sky gradually darkened. Emperor Xia slowly walked to the heavenly mandate palace in the imperial city. This was the highest place in the imperial city, and one could see everything in the imperial city. Old dog Pei, do you think he will like the gift I gave him? Emperor Xia said with a cold smile. If you want him to like it, he must like it, Your Majesty. Eunuch Pei walked out and said in a hoarse voice. I am the Emperor of Xia Kingdom. Anyone who dares to go against my will must die. As he spoke, the smile on Emperor Xia's face grew colder and colder. It carried a trace of madness, and people could not help but feel cold. Chapter 104. It was late at night, but there were still many people who were not asleep. The Grand Advisor, the eldest grandson, Qin Ning, and the first prince were all looking in the direction of the manor of the Marquis of Jiming with worry in their eyes. An uneasy atmosphere was spreading in and out of the palace. No one knew what would happen tonight. Manor of the Marquis of Jiming. Red words were engraved on the plaque in front of the manor. Under the moonlight, they emitted a dazzling blood-red color. Ning Chen sat in his room within the manor, his brows furrowed in worry. He still couldn't figure out what Emperor Xia was planning. The night was getting darker, and the lights in the manor were gradually extinguished. Suddenly, light footsteps came from outside the door. It was a little hurried, as if something was going to happen. Ning Chen walked forward and opened the door. He saw a girl dressed as a maid holding a candle and hurrying east. He could not help but frown. It was already so late. Where was she going? Little Mingyue was still in the room, and Ning Chen did not dare to leave. After closing the door, he thought for a while and did not take it to heart. There was no fluctuation of vital energy on this maid, and she was not a threat to him. Not everyone could hide their martial cultivation like Fan Lingyue. It was enough that there was one Fan Lingyue in the world. It was impossible for there to be a second one. Little Mingyue lay on the bed, tossing and turning. After a while, she sat up and said sadly, "The candle is too bright. I can't sleep." Ning Chen was startled. He was so busy thinking that he had forgotten about this. Ning Chen got up to blow out the candle. At this moment, his body trembled, and his expression changed. Candle, oh no. He was too careless. The moon was so bright outside. Why did the maid have to hold a candle? Wasn't it unnecessary? In this world, he was all too familiar with things that needed to use fire. After a moment of thought, Ning Chen's figure flashed. He picked up little Mingyue and rushed out of the manor without saying a word. However, he was still half a step too slow. The next moment, an earth-shattering explosion sounded. It was as if thunder from the ninth heaven had struck the world. The loud explosion instantly woke everyone in the imperial city. Qin Ning and the Grand Advisor, who had been paying attention, suddenly changed their expressions. How could it be? In front of the heavenly mandate palace, Emperor Xia looked at the sudden explosion in the imperial city and laughed crazily. "Old dog Pei, what do you think of my gift?" Emperor Xia laughed wildly and crazily. Although those useless people of the celestial workshop were unable to find the formula, they still found the way to explode. So what if they were not powerful enough? He had plenty of manpower and money. He had already ordered the entire Jiming Marquis residence to be buried full of medicinal stones. He had been waiting for this moment. Amidst the flames, Ning Chen, who was holding little Mingyu, was sent flying 10 feet away by the aftershock. As soon as he landed on the ground, he suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood. "Xia Rui, you old man." Seeing that the mansion behind him, along with hundreds of servants, was instantly engulfed in the sea of fire, a vicious glint flashed in Ning Chen's eyes as he shouted furiously in the direction of the palace. At the same time, outside the firelight, 3 strong breaths appeared. Each of them was at the later stage of level 9 or the peak of level 9. They were the 3 commanders of the hidden dragon guards. In front of the heavenly mandate palace, Emperor Xia's laughter gradually stopped, and he said calmly, "Old dog Pei, go and take a look. If they don't live up to your expectations, you can do it yourself." "Yes." Old eunuch Pei bowed respectfully, then turned into a streak of light and shot towards the sea of fire in the imperial city. In the Duke of Grand Wisdom's manor, the Duke of Grand Wisdom's feet moved. Just as he was about to move, he was blocked by Duke Shiyu. "Duke Shiyu, you." The Duke of Grand Wisdom's expression was slightly angry as he shouted. "Emperor Xia has ordered me to keep you here. My good friend, I apologize for the offense." Duke Shiyu retracted her feather fan and sent out a palm strike towards the Duke of Grand Wisdom. The Duke of Grand Wisdom had no choice but to use his own moves to deal with it. The righteous Qi of the Confucian school was a match of supreme arts, and it was difficult to determine who would emerge victorious. To the side, Duke Jingwu had also arrived. He sighed softly and did not help either side. In front of Weiyang Palace, the Imperial Guard quickly surrounded it. Several of the Imperial Guard leaders stood guard at the entrance, blocking Qing Ning's path. Zhang Xuan's expression was extremely ugly, and the flames of anger in his heart rose. Had Emperor Xia gone mad? In the Marquis Jiming's manner, Ning Chen carried little Ming Yu on his back in front of the raging flames. Soon after, with a ripping sound, he tore open his clothes and tied the little girl to his body in circles. Today, whether dead or alive, little Ming Yu could not leave him even half a step. Are you afraid? Ning Chen turned his head and asked softly. No, Ming Yu shook her head and replied. All right, then let's kill our way out together today. Ning Chen pulled out the ink sword on his back and held it in his right hand, then walked forward step by step. The three commanders of the Hidden Dragon Guard surrounded him. Their expressions were cold, and the killing intent in their eyes was not concealed at all. Having already been injured in the previous explosion, Ning Chen knew that dragging the battle out would be disadvantageous for him. Thus, he moved his ink sword and attacked first. A sword light flashed past, sweeping towards one of the commanders. A peak 8th rank martial artist against a late 9th rank martial artist. This was a battle of a whole level, and 1 against 3. The result was almost obvious. With a bang, the sword and halberd collided, causing dust to fill the air. The stone floor beneath their feet cracked, and the yellow soil spread everywhere, obscuring their line of sight. Ning Chen's slightly inferior move changed again because of the arrival of a saber and a sword behind him. Ning Chen's body flashed and moved 30 feet away, barely avoiding the combined power of the saber and the sword. The three commanders of the Hidden Dragon Guard surrounded him again, their auras becoming more and more majestic. One was a peak 9th rank martial artist, and 2 were late 9th rank martial artists. Their strength was unquestionable. Ning Chen's expression was solemn. Even if he was at his peak, he could at most deal with one of these experts. Now that he was seriously injured, there was almost no chance of winning. However, after one move, he had basically tested the strength of the three. The one holding the halberd was undoubtedly a peak 9th rank martial artist. The other 2 were slightly weaker, but they were late 9th rank martial artists. What was there to fight in such a battle? That old man Xia Rui, in order to kill him, had probably sent out the 3 strongest members of the Hidden Dragon Guard. Ning Chen understood that he could not continue fighting. Now, the most important thing was to kill his way out of the encirclement. Thinking of this, Ning Chen sheathed the black sword in his hand. With a flip of his palm, the Deathbreaker bow flew out. The bow bent like a crescent moon, and 3 arrows were shot in succession, all aimed at the commander of the Hidden Dragon Guard. The 3 arrow lights chased after the stars and the moon, each brighter and scarier than the last. The commander of the Hidden Dragon Guard's expression was solemn. He did not dare to be careless. He raised his halberd, and with a swing of the halberd, the sky was cut. There was a loud explosion. Even someone as strong as the commander of the Hidden Dragon Guard could not withstand the terrifying aftershock, and retreated 10 steps. At this moment, the Black Sword and Frost had already arrived in front of the other commander holding the sword. The graceful sword had thousands of changes, condensing into one. It was so fast that it was unbelievable. The second commander of the Hidden Dragon Guard's expression changed. He held his sword horizontally to block the attack, but he could not block it. The sword entered his body, and he retreated a few steps. Ugh! Blood spurted out from the penetrated shoulder. The second commander of the Hidden Dragon Guard endured the pain, and with a flip of his palm, he pressed towards Ning Chen's chest. At the same time, the third commander of the Hidden Dragon Guard's blade light also arrived in front of him. Ning Chen took the palm head-on and retreated 3 steps. He took the opportunity to pull out the black sword, and with a flip of his left palm, a dark yellow light flourished. Thick earth chi exploded, and the third commander of the Hidden Dragon Guard's body became unstable, and a flaw appeared in his move. Waves of the World East. The moment he changed his move, blue waves surged around Ning Chen, and he pressed his palm towards the third commander of the hidden dragon guard. With a bang, the third commander blocked with his blade, and his body retreated a few feet, but he was not seriously injured. Ning Chen's sudden change of move was not enough, and did not pose much of a threat. However, this was enough. Finally, there was only one commander left in front of him. Ning Chen moved his sword, and used his final move. Raging waves roared out from the 9 heavens, and with a slash of his sword, the sword split open the raging sea. First defense, raging waves splitting 10,000 li. A world-shaking might roared out, and the third cyclone in Ning Chen's body instantly dried up, and he fell into a deathly stillness. The second commander of the hidden dragon guard flew out with a bang, and blood sprayed out, dyeing half the sky red. Ning Chen's feet moved, and he was about to take this opportunity to rush out of the encirclement. However, at this moment, a withered hand appeared in the distance, quickly approaching, and in the blink of an eye, sealed off his escape route. Ning Chen hurriedly retreated, and was once again in a difficult situation. This old eunuch had actually come as well. Where was the Grand Advisor? Why did he not come as promised? Ning Chen's heart sank. This battle boded ill, and he was far from being able to fight with an innate stage master. Old eunuch Pei did not say anything, and with a flash of his body, he attacked again. Ning Chen's pupils constricted, and he was about to raise his genuine qi again, when suddenly, a sense of weakness came over him, and he staggered. Imperial Palace, Heavenly Mandate Palace. Emperor Xia stood quietly in front of the palace, looking at the scenery in the firelight, and smiled proudly, with a hint of madness. However, a scene that no one expected happened. In front of Emperor Xia's chest, a ray of sword light shot out silently, without any warning. Emperor Xia turned his head with difficulty, and the shock in his eyes could not be concealed. West Palace, it's you. Your Majesty, you were careless. Imperial concubine Wan, or should she be called Qin Wuhan, said softly. As she spoke, the sword in her hand cut another 3 inches, and a large amount of blood splattered. I didn't expect it to really be you. Before he finished speaking, Emperor Xia coughed violently, and blood spilled from his mouth. He had been careless. He had suspected the West Palace, and had even thought that Wan Yunshang was the mastermind behind the internal strife of the Great Xia. However, after Prince Yu was killed, he had temporarily suppressed this thought. He did not expect that the one who betrayed him in the end would be someone close to him. Have you practiced martial arts? Emperor Xia asked, coughing up blood. I've been crippled, or else how could I have come to your side? Qin Wuhan's beautiful face flashed with a trace of emotion. She had waited for this day for nearly 10 years. Ha, ridiculous, ridiculous. Emperor Xia suddenly turned around and pressed his palm against Qin Wuhan's chest. With a bang, blood spurted out, and the most beautiful woman in the world flew out like cotton in the rain. Her last shocked look faded as her scattered hair gradually faded. Attacks on the heart were calculated, and in the end, who would open their heart to the other party? Emperor Xia did not even look at the West Palace again. He staggered with each step, coughing up blood with each step. He dragged his dying body slowly and stubbornly toward the dragon throne in the Heavenly Mandate Palace. The high and lofty steps, the majesty of the past, had become difficult today. Emperor Xia clutched at his bleeding chest, and with each step he took, he had to rest for a moment. After a long time, the stubborn figure finally sat on the dragon throne. The next moment, crazy laughter rang throughout the Heavenly Mandate Palace, and it did not stop for a long time. He was Emperor Xia, the unmistakable emperor of the Great Xia. Chapter 105. Emperor Xia was dead. He died on the dragon throne. The smile on his face was still maniacal. He had no regrets even in death. The empty Heavenly Mandate Palace was cold and silent. No one came in. Outside the palace, Qin Wuhan lay there quietly. Her palace dress was stained with blood. Under the moonlight, she looked like a blooming rose. Two people who schemed against each other ended up being each other's last companions. How ironic and sad was that? Emperor Xia was skilled in martial arts. In the palace of Great Xia, there was a treasure that could hide the secrets of heaven. It hid the vision of old eunuch Pei when he broke through to the Khanate level. It also hid the fact that Emperor Xia was participating in the martial arts competition. However, Emperor Xia's martial arts cultivation was not strong. Long years of hard work had already exhausted his body. Instead of improving, his martial arts had regressed. Xia Rui was undoubtedly the most diligent emperor of Great Xia in the past 1,000 years. Because of his paranoia and suspicion, he had to make decisions himself no matter how big or small the matter was. He would never hand it over to others. In his later years, Xia Rui was pitiful. The pressure of not wanting to be the most incompetent emperor of Great Xia, coupled with his increasing suspicion, finally made this conservative emperor a tyrant. In the 1,000 years of history of Great Xia, there had never been a tyrant. It only stopped when Xia Rui was born. It was both fortunate and unfortunate. Xia Rui never lacked powerful people by his side. Other than old eunuch Pei, there were also 3 commanders of the Shadow Dragon Guards. They were enough to deal with any assassination in the world. Unfortunately, the 4 strongest people were not by his side today. Qin Wuhan was from the West Palace. Therefore, other than these 4 direct descendants of Emperor Xia, no one dared to stop her. Who would have thought that Consort 1 of Great Xia was a spy planted by the military advisor of Beimeng? Qin Wuhan's only mistake was that she had miscalculated the possibility of Emperor Xia participating in the martial arts competition. A momentary mistake caused her to die. As for whether Fan Lingyue had predicted this, no one in the world knew. A breeze blew, bringing with it a slight chill. It made the lonely heavenly mandate palace even colder. In the spring of the 2nd year of Great Xia, Emperor Xia collapsed. In the imperial city, the battle was still going on. Blazing flames soared into the sky. A withered hand covered the sky. Ning Chen, who was already exhausted, had no way out. Life and death was in an instant. Little Mingyu closed her eyes in despair, unwilling to watch. However, at this moment, 2 streams of light, one green and one red, appeared in the sky and arrived in the blink of an eye. With a shwa sound, the 2 swords flew towards eunuch Pei's hands, blocking this deadly palm strike. On the other side, the first prince had also arrived. His overwhelming aura shook off the halberd, and he brought Ning Chen out of the battlefield. Ning Chen's body staggered once again before he could step out. His chest felt heavy, and he immediately vomited a mouthful of blood. Due to the excessive consumption of his jinqi, the injuries in his body could no longer be suppressed. Finally, they exploded at this moment. The sudden change startled old eunuch Pei and the 3 Dark Dragon Guard commanders. Just as they were about to attack again, old eunuch Pei's expression suddenly changed. "Your Majesty!" Old eunuch Pei stamped his feet and turned into a stream of light as he rushed back. He could clearly feel that something had happened to his Majesty. The 3 commanders of the Dark Dragon Guards did not know the reason. They looked at each other with surprise and confusion in their eyes. "This battle is over. Everyone, go back." Amidst the calm words, a green figure slowly walked over. The green and red swords stuck in the ground trembled as they flew towards the newcomer. Prince Yen. The 3 commanders of the Dark Dragon Guards squinted their eyes as they became fearful. Back when Prince Yen fought his way out of the palace, they had exchanged blows with him. They knew how powerful this legend of the Great Xia dynasty was. They even suspected that the legend of the Great Xia dynasty might have already stepped into the Xiantian realm. "Retreat." The commander of the Dark Dragon Guards made a prompt decision and said in a low voice. There was no chance of winning this battle. With Prince Yen around, they could no longer complete their mission. The other two commanders nodded. Their figures flashed and they quickly disappeared from the battlefield. After the three of them left, Xia Zi looked at the person in front of him and bowed respectfully. Third uncle. Yes. Prince Yen nodded in response. He then walked to Ning Chen and gathered his Jinshi into his palm to help him suppress his injuries. Ning Chen calmed his mind and closed his eyes. He activated the life scroll and used Prince Yan's Jinshi to slowly suppress the surging blood in his body. Third uncle, teacher is still waiting for my news. Z will take his leave first. Seeing that Ning Chen's life was not in danger, Xia Zi cupped his hands and said goodbye. He then turned and left. Ning Chen slowly opened his eyes and looked at the departing Xia Zi. He felt complicated. This was the first time he had seen the crown prince, but he could not help but sigh. The difference between the current Emperor Xia and the crown prince was too great. The Emperor Xia's ruthlessness and gloominess and the crown prince's benevolence and righteousness were two polar opposites. Z is not bad, but he's not suitable to be an emperor, Prince Yen said indifferently. Ning Chen did not refute. What the senior said was true. As an emperor, he could not lack either benevolence or ruthlessness. The crown prince was indeed not suitable. Of course, the Emperor Xia was even more unsuitable. Let's go. Follow me back to the residence first. Prince Yen waved his hand and a sword rack appeared in front of Ning Chen. Ning Chen did not say anything else. He carried the sword rack on his back and looked at it. Little Mingyue lay on Ning Chen's back and curiously pulled at the swords on the rack, but she could not pull any of them out. Mingyue, don't be naughty, Ning Chen said softly. The little girl withdrew her hand and smiled embarrassedly. Senior, please keep this a secret, Ning Chen said with a hint of pleading. Okay, Prince Yen did not turn his head. Little Mingyue was confused. She did not understand what the two of them were talking about. Ning Chen rubbed the little girl's cloth hat and did not explain. When little Mingyue touched the sword on the rack, the fact that she was a girl was no longer a secret. In the world, only Prince Yen could sense the sword's aura. Back then, it was because he had touched the azure sword that his secret of being a fake eunuch was exposed. Fortunately, Prince Yan's temperament was indifferent and he did not take this matter to heart. They quickly arrived at Prince Yan's residence. A beautiful maid brought little Mingyue back to her room to rest. Ning Chen followed Prince Yen to the study. Senior, was the commotion outside northern Meng City caused by your battle with that sword in Sword City? Ning Chen hesitated for a moment before asking the question that had been in his heart for a long time. Yes, Prince Yen nodded. Did you obtain that sand sword? Ning Chen continued to ask. Prince Yan's hand moved slightly. Fine sand flew out of the rack and condensed into a light yellow sword. Ning Chen's pupils constricted. What a strange sword. There really were all kinds of strange things in the world. Did that sword in Sword City lose? Ning Chen's eyes flashed. Sword City's sword was an invincible legend in the hearts of all swordsmen. It was hard to imagine that it would lose. He did not lose, but I won. Prince Yen waved his hand. The sand sword scattered and returned to the rack. Ning Chen was startled. He did not understand. I got there before him, so the sword must be mine. In other words, if he got there first, the sword was his, explained Prince Yen calmly. Ning Chen did not understand. His cultivation level was still very low. He could not imagine what had happened that day. At this moment, hurried footsteps came from outside the door. An anxious voice rang out. Prince, news has come from the palace. His Majesty was attacked by an assassin and died. How? The sudden news caused Ning Chen's heart to tremble violently. For a moment, he couldn't believe it. Let's go. Follow me to the palace, said Prince Yen. He quickly reacted. What about Mingyue? Ning Chen asked worriedly. Don't worry. There are housekeepers in the residence. As long as they are not Xiantian, no one can hurt her, replied Prince Yen. Ning Chen nodded. He carried the rack and followed Prince Yen out of the residence. At the same time, in the imperial city, those who stood at the top of the Xia dynasty all received the news of Emperor Xia's death. They were shocked and immediately chose to enter the palace. This was an earth-shattering event. Emperor Xia's death was too sudden. The Xia dynasty might once again be plunged into a bloodbath. Outside the heavenly mandate palace, the 3 chancellors, the 9 ministers, and the feudal lords of the imperial city had all arrived. However, at this moment, there were only 3 people who attracted the most attention. The first Prince Xia Zi, the third Prince Xia Yanwu, and the 10th Prince Xia Mingri. They were the princes of the Xia dynasty most likely to become the new emperor. They would also decide the future direction of the Xia dynasty. The fact that Emperor Xia had not chosen a successor was the biggest hidden danger. Now that Emperor Xia was dead, the throne of the Xia dynasty was also uncertain. In the distance, Prince Yen walked over step by step. Behind him was Ning Chen, who was carrying a sword on his back. They immediately attracted everyone's attention. They had all heard the big explosion tonight clearly. They were very curious about the main character of the night before. It had to be said that this newly appointed Marquis Jiming was very lucky. This was the first time that Emperor Xia had failed to kill someone. Greetings, Prince Yen. All the officials bowed. Although the legend of the Xia dynasty did not care about politics, it did not stop him from having the highest title. No one dared to miss this bow. Rise, said Prince Yen indifferently. Thank you, Prince Yen. All the officials stood up. Third brother, long time no see. At the same time, Prince Hua stepped forward and bowed. 7 years. Prince Yan's eyes flashed with a touch of sadness. 7 years was not a long time, but it was also not a short time. His fourth brother was gradually showing signs of age. Time was merciless. It made people grow old in the blink of an eye. Big brother, looking at the heavenly mandate palace, Prince Hua sighed again. Although he had been put under house arrest by Emperor Xia in the imperial city for more than 10 years, he was still alive compared to his other brothers. After a person died, all grievances would vanish like smoke. All that was left was regret. The hatred of the past had faded after more than 10 years of house arrest. He was tired of hating and had come to terms with it. In life, one could not live with hatred in their hearts. Now that Emperor Xia was dead, only the 3 of them were left of more than 10 brothers. Let's go to the palace and send him off for the last time. With that, Prince Yen walked toward the heavenly mandate palace. Behind him, all the officials followed the 2 princes into the palace. After entering, they all knelt down respectfully. Not long after, Prince Zhongsun walked in wearing a crown of dragon and phoenix pearls. He wore a robe with golden dragon and phoenix patterns. Looking at Emperor Xia on the dragon throne, he sighed deeply. It was difficult to say whether he was happy or sad. They had been together for more than 10 years. Today, they were going to send each other off in luxurious clothes. On the dragon throne, Emperor Xia's eyes were wide open. He was laughing with a hint of madness. He had no regrets in this life. Chapter 106. Within 2 days, the news of Emperor Xia's death had spread throughout the world. Everyone was shocked speechless. This time, Emperor Xia was truly dead. Moreover, behind this shocking news, there was an equally frightening truth. Emperor Xia had died in an assassination attempt. The assassin was Consort Wan of the Western Palace. Wan Yunshang had been in the palace for 9 years. No one expected her to act only now. Very few people knew that the Western Palace's consort Wan was Qin Wuhan of the Qin clan. And those who knew would never say it out loud. The war between the two dynasties had gone through too many twists and turns, ups and downs. Today, neither dynasty had an emperor. It had to be said that it was a kind of irony. It was hard to say who was the happiest about Emperor Xia's death, but there were definitely people who were happy. Little Mingyu was one of them. Ning Chen needed to recuperate, so he stayed in Prince Yan's residence for the time being. Little Mingyu naturally stayed as well. Although the little girl was a captive, hostage in name, she was no different from an ancestor. She had a butler to protect her, so there was no need to worry about her safety. Ning Chen didn't restrict her freedom either. She could do whatever she wanted. Emperor Xia was dead, and eunuch Pei was in seclusion. No one in the imperial city would cause trouble for him and little Mingyu for the time being. Now, everyone was paying attention to which prince would inherit the throne. The powerful officials in the court were also quickly choosing sides. It would probably take a while before anyone had time to care about them. Zhang Sun was probably having a headache. Emperor Xia's funeral and the appointment of the crown prince required her attention. But he couldn't help with these matters, so he was happy to be idle. As for the Western Palace's identity, he had a vague guess but couldn't be sure. But he was sure that Wan Yunshang was related to the Beimeng court. A few months ago, when he received the letter of Beiwu Marquis' betrayal, the Western Palace had sent people to kill him. But there was no point in worrying about Wan Yunshang's identity now. Emperor Xia's death was a fact. At this juncture, no one would admit it. There were too many mysteries in history. This one didn't make much of a difference. Prince Yan was rarely in the manor these days. He had probably been dragged away by Zhang Sun. Zhang Sun was the best coolie in the world. If not for the fact that he could not help much, he probably would not have been able to escape. It could be said that the 2 days after Emperor Xia's death were the most leisurely days he had had since he came to this world. He didn't need to work, fight, or take care of his child. Bad guy, I'm back. At this moment, little Mingyu ran back happily in her cloth hat. The butler behind her had a helpless look on his face as he carried a bunch of things in his arms. Heh. Ning Chen felt very good in his heart. Seeing others in pain was really a pleasurable thing. Uncle Rong, thank you for your hard work. Although he was gloating in his heart, Ning Chen still revealed a bashful and grateful smile. It's fine. Just focus on recuperating, Uncle Rong replied with a bitter smile. Uncle Rong, what's the situation outside? Is it still so chaotic? Ning Chen asked curiously. It's much better. The Marquis of Taiping and the Marquis of the blood-clad Marquis dragged their injured bodies out to take charge. At least some of the restless people have some fear and temporarily restrain themselves, Uncle Rong replied. Ning Chen nodded his head in understanding. In the Grand Xia, the power of a marquis was not something the other officials could compare to. With 2 marquises taking charge at the same time, there would not be much trouble in the imperial city. The biggest problem right now was who the throne belonged to. The Grand Xia could not be without a ruler for too long. The decisions of Zhang Sun and the 3 dukes were extremely important. However, this decision was not so easy to make. Every prince had their own officials supporting them. Even the 3 dukes were not united internally. Duke Taisha was the first prince's teacher, Duke Jingwu was the 3rd prince's martial arts guide, and Duke Shiyu admired the 10th prince. In short, the situation was a mess that could not be sorted out in a short period of time. Logically speaking, the first prince was the eldest son. Although he was not the son of Zhang Sun, he was still the son of the former imperial noble concubine and was raised under Zhang Xuan's name. Thus, it was perfectly justifiable for him to inherit the throne. However, in the history of the Grand Xia, there were not many true elders. This seemingly justifiable reason was actually not very convincing. In addition, the other two princes were equally outstanding. The strength of their support was also not to be underestimated. It had to be said that with the death of Emperor Xia, the Grand Xia would indeed be in chaos for a while. Who knew what that woman, Fan Lingyue, would do that again? Women being too smart was indeed a scary thing. Ning Chen felt a headache coming on. He did not want to think about it anymore. With great difficulty, he sorted out his emotions. Just as he was about to reach out and snatch little Ming Yu's snacks, a voice that he did not want to hear rang out. Announcing the Empress's imperial decree, Marquis Zhongsun is to enter the palace. A young eunuch walked into the prince's residence and directly read out Zhongsun's decree. Ning Chen was immediately displeased. As expected, he did not escape. However, what made him even more displeased was that he did not dare to resist. Mingyu, are you going? Ning Chen turned his head and glanced at the little girl beside him who was eating a table full of snacks. I'm going. Mingyu threw down the snacks in her hand and replied. Let's go. Ning Chen took little Mingyu's hand and bade farewell to Uncle Rong. Then, he followed the young eunuch to the palace. The palace was now heavily guarded. The figures of the imperial guards could be seen everywhere. Every one of them had a faint murderous aura. They must have dealt with many people these days. Zhongsun was waiting for him in the heavenly mandate palace. Now that he was no longer a eunuch, he definitely could not enter Weiyang Palace. It was very troublesome to meet Zhongsun. According to the rules of the Grand Xia, the imperial harem could not interfere in politics. Usually, even Zhongsun could not privately summon foreign officials. However, special times called for special treatment. Now that the Grand Xia was on the brink of crisis, if Zhongsun did not come out to help stabilize the situation, the imperial court would be in chaos. In the heavenly mandate palace, Zhongsun sat there quietly. Qing Ning was not by his side. It seemed that she had something to do and left. Ning Chen held little Ming Yu's hand and walked over. He respectfully knelt down and saluted, causing little Ming Yu to be stunned. Would a bad person salute someone? This was the first time she had seen it. That's enough. I don't usually see you following the rules so well, Zhongsun said irritably. Ning Chen got up. He felt a little uneasy. Zhongsun seemed to be in a bad mood. This time, he was most likely going to be struck by lightning. I am very busy, so I'll make it short. The Northern Meng military advisor needs you to talk to him. How the discussion goes, you can consider it yourself. I can't be bothered to say threats like bringing your head to me. However, before I clean up this mess, I don't want to see the Northern Meng's army under my nose. There were no outsiders present. Zhang Xuan's tone was very impolite. She only made requests and did not care about the specifics. She did not have the energy to care. These matters in the palace were enough for her. Just me alone? Ning Chen asked, puzzled. Why are you going alone? Do you want to die? Zhang Sun was so angry that she wanted to kick him. Ning Chen's neck shrank after being scolded and he immediately lowered his head. Zhang Sun suppressed the irritation in her heart and said in an unfriendly tone, the Marquis of Blood-Clothed will go with you. In addition, I will send you 5,000 imperial guards to accompany you. In addition to the 70,000 soldiers in Beichue City, no matter what you do, you have to delay until Great Xia recovers. Ning Chen nodded fiercely and did not dare to say anything more. Go back and prepare today. We will set off early tomorrow morning. Alright, you can go. After saying this, Zhang Sun waved her hand and directly drove him away. Hearing this, Ning Chen did not say anything. After saluting, he quickly turned and left. Little Mingyu was also shocked by Zhang Xuan's aura and looked a little silly. After leaving the heavenly mandate palace, the two of them let out a sigh of relief at the same time. She's so fierce. Little Mingyu said with lingering fear. I'm used to it. Ning Chen was covered in cold sweat. Do you think Sister Lingyue will withdraw the army? Ming Yu looked up and asked. Ever since she saw so many soldiers who died in Beijing Plain, she felt more and more that war was wrong. Ning Chen did not answer directly but asked, if you were still in Beimeng Imperial Palace and ordered Fan Lingyue to withdraw the army, do you think she would? Ming Yu thought for a while and finally shook her head in frustration. No. Although Sister Lingyue doted on her a lot, it was impossible for her to compromise on this kind of matter. She had not taken over the government and her power was limited. As long as Sister Lingyue insisted on not withdrawing, she could not do anything. Does Fan Lingyue look like a bad queen? Ning Chen did not want little Mingyu to be too depressed and joked. Just a little. Mingyu stretched out her little finger and secretly gestured. Ha, you've improved. Ning Chen chuckled. At least he did not tell her the story in vain. Was this considered educating her from a young age? Fan Lingyue had already grown up bad. He had to quickly grow a kind little flower. A day passed quickly. On the second day, the army set out. The 5,000 imperial guards headed north in a grandiose manner. Marquis Bloodrobed rode at the front of the army, wearing a dark red battle suit. He was the most hard-working martial marquis in Wuxia. He had guarded the Western Territory for many years and fought against the entire Eternal Night cult. Marquis Bloodrobed was defeated in a battle with a martial monarch and was seriously injured. However, in this world, how many people could survive in the hands of a martial monarch? Marquis Bloodrobed was only a half-step Xiantian, but he was able to do something that even Xiantian could not do. This was the first time Ning Chen and Marquis Bloodrobed met. After meeting, Ning Chen respectfully bowed. This martial marquis who did not hesitate to strike a stone with an egg in order to protect Wuxia's borders was truly worthy of respect. Marquis Bloodrobed was not good with words and only nodded slightly. The mighty army rushed day and night and rarely rested. The imperial guards were all experts with a foundation in martial arts. This kind of intensity was still acceptable. However, little Mingyu was suffering. The little girl could not stand the bumpy ride on the horse. Ning Chen's heart ached when he saw this, so he got off the horse and carried little Mingyu on his back and followed the army on foot. A strange look flashed through Marquis Bloodrobe's eyes, but he did not say anything. 7 days later, the army that had rushed day and night finally arrived at Beizue City. On the opposite side, Northern Meng's main camp had already been stationed for half a month. The soldiers and horses were orderly and could attack at any time. On this night, Ning Chen wrote a letter and sent it to Northern Meng's main camp, which was 15 kilometers away. The content was very simple. There were only 11 words, Ming Yu is in my hands. Come out and talk. Chapter 107. In the commander's tent of the Northern Meng camp, Fan Lingyue sat quietly in front of the table, reading the letter sent by the great Xia envoy. A strange look flashed across her beautiful face. In the end, they still officially met. Since the first time Ning Chen's name appeared in front of her, she wanted to kill him. She hated unexpected things the most in her life, and Ning Chen's appearance was very likely to become an unpredictable variable in her plans. Facts proved that her worries back then had become reality. In the short few months that followed, Ning Chen had ruined too many of her plans, causing the world's war against the great Xia to change. She wanted to get rid of him, but unfortunately, she had not succeeded. Now that things had come to this, she could only accept it. Thinking of this, Fan Lingyue looked at the envoy in front of her and said calmly, "Go back and tell Ning Chen that I will wait for him before the Ming army arrives." The envoy of the great Xia dynasty bowed and left. After the envoy left, Fan Lingyue looked at the letter on the table and slowly closed her eyes. Her mind was heavy as she weighed the pros and cons. Behind her, Qing Wuyo looked a little worried, but did not dare to disturb her. The atmosphere in the tent was quiet and somewhat oppressive. After a long time, Fan Lingyue opened her eyes and made up her mind. She could not ignore Ming Yu's safety, and Ning Chen very likely already knew that Ming Yu was a girl. Once exposed, it would be a heavy blow to the Northern Meng royal court. The Empress could not be accepted by the world, and Northern Meng was no exception. She had to save Ming Yu, but it was impossible to retreat. Fortunately, Ning Chen also had his own weaknesses, and she was not completely helpless. "Men," Fan Lingyue said. Present, a general walked in and bowed respectfully. "Send this letter to Sword City." Fan Lingyue took out a letter that she had prepared long ago and instructed. Yes, the general took the letter and left quickly. "How is the southwest? That little bald donkey has been in Northern Meng for some time. Has the old monk still not made up his mind?" Fan Lingyue asked calmly. According to the report of the spies, the abbot of Du Yi Temple has already begun to recall the monks of the Buddhist kingdom. "It should be soon," Qin Wuyo replied seriously. "Buddhists who preach justice can't resist temptation in the end. In this world, there is no such thing as absolute justice," Fan Lingyue sneered softly, her tone slightly mocking. "You can leave now." After asking all the questions, Fan Lingyue asked. "Military advisor, His Majesty is here." Qin Wuyo opened his mouth, and there was a trace of uneasiness in his eyes. He didn't know what the military counselor was planning, but there was no doubt that Great Xia would make an issue out of the safety of the emperor. He was worried that the military counselor would compromise, but he was even more worried that the military counselor would remain indifferent. Now, the safety of His Majesty and the advance and retreat of the Northern Meng army were all in the hands of the military advisor. No matter what he chose, there was no solution. "I know what I'm doing." "You may leave," Fan Lingyue said indifferently. "Yes." Qin Wuyo sighed softly and turned to leave. Now, he could only hope that the military advisor would be able to lead the Northern Meng army out of this dilemma. Northwest City. Ning Chen stood in front of the window in his room, similarly thinking of a countermeasure. The person he had to face was Fan Lingyue, the smartest woman in the world. The slightest bit of carelessness would cause him to pay an unbearable price. He had never underestimated this woman, yet he had still suffered in the hands of Fan Lingyue time and time again, almost dying a few times. If it wasn't for his luck, he would already be drinking tea with the king of hell right now. Transmigration wasn't omnipotent, but Fan Lingyue was omnipotent. He had suffered enough losses. Now, his only advantage was that he had little Ming Yu in his hands. Fan Lingyue would more or less have some misgivings. In addition, Ming Yu was a girl's secret, so he could use it to exchange for something. He promised little Ming Yu that he wouldn't tell anyone because he was afraid that the little girl would be hurt, and Fan Lingyue wouldn't know. With such a good advantage, it would be a waste not to use it. Fan Lingyue would definitely not agree to retreat. How to make the best use of the trump card in his hands was the most important thing for him to consider. There weren't many soldiers in Northwest City, only 70,000. In addition to the 5,000 imperial guards that he and the Marquis brought, it wasn't even a third of the Northern Meng army. 75,000 against 250,000, including 100,000 iron cavalry and 10,000 heavy cavalry. No matter how he thought about it, it was an extremely nonsensical matter. Northern Meng's iron cavalry weren't idiots who didn't know how to fight after getting off their horses. Moreover, the truly terrifying thing was the 10,000 invulnerable heavy cavalry. On the battlefield, they were killing machines that couldn't be stopped. There were no more than 10,000 heavy cavalry. If there were more than 10,000 heavy cavalry, they couldn't be stopped. In the east, the Eternal Night cult relied on 30,000 heavy cavalry to beat Great Xia. If it wasn't for Marquis Kaixuan and the 100,000 Black Water Army, the east side of Great Xia would have been destroyed long ago. Northern Meng didn't have as many heavy cavalry as the Eternal Night cult, but there were still 10,000 of them. On the battlefield, they were still invincible and unstoppable. Great Xia only had Marquis Kaixuan and the 100,000 Black Water Army. It wasn't easy to deal with the martial lords and the heavy cavalry of the Eternal Night cult, so it was impossible for them to have extra energy to care about this side. The matter of reinforcements couldn't be hoped for in the short term. Zhang Sun was already having a hard time holding on in the imperial city. The sudden death of Emperor Xia had an even more obvious impact. Great Xia had to be on guard against internal strife. The military forces around the imperial city couldn't be easily mobilized. Otherwise, once a mutiny occurred, it would be too late for regrets. The greed of humans was incomparably terrifying. They wouldn't give up on the throne just because there was a great enemy outside. This was also the reason why Zhang Sun and the three dukes didn't dare to rashly appoint a new emperor. The eldest prince wasn't too bad. He didn't show much desire for the throne and had always had an indifferent attitude. However, the other two princes were different. After the disappearance of Emperor Xia, they tried their best to rope in a large number of influential officials. In addition, after the death of Emperor Xia, the officials immediately took sides. The wings of the two princes were already full, and it was impossible to cut them off so easily. In any dynasty, the matter of the princes fighting for the throne was full of bloodshed. The Great Xia dynasty had been established for 1,000 years, and there were many talents among the princes. If it weren't for the control of each generation of Emperor Xia, this kind of battle would be even more bloody. Xia Rui had brought great trouble to the Great Xia when he was alive. After his death, he also left a huge hidden danger for the Great Xia. The three princes were all favored by God. One was lucky, any more would be a disaster. He knew that Zhang Sun was having a hard time holding on, which was why he agreed to come so quickly. Now that the Great Xia was facing internal and external troubles, there weren't many people that Zhang Sun could rely on. Since Zhang Sun asked him to come, he had to come. This was the most difficult period for the Great Xia. If they could pull through, they might still have a chance of winning. If they couldn't, the 1,000 years of the Great Xia would really come to an end. The headmaster said that the Great Xia would be destroyed. He didn't know if it would be in this war, but he had to give it a try. Although he didn't like to talk nonsense like, man can conquer nature, he would definitely use all that he had learned in his previous and current lives to fight against this bullshit God's will. Bad guy, I can't sleep. At this moment, Mingyu sat up from the bed. She couldn't hide the worry on her face. She was a little scared. Tomorrow, the bad guy and Sister Lingyue would officially start the negotiations. She was struggling in her heart, not knowing who to hope for. She knew that Sister Lingyue wouldn't withdraw the troops. The war between the two dynasties would continue. She was the emperor of the Northern Meng. Of course, she didn't want the soldiers of the Northern Meng to be buried in a foreign land. If the bad guy had the upper hand, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for the Northern Meng army. However, if Sister Lingyue had the upper hand and continued to go south, there wouldn't be many of the 300,000 soldiers who could return alive. Ning Chen walked to the front of the bed and gently rubbed the little girl's hair. He sighed in his heart. From the beginning, this war of life and death was destined to be a road of no return. Fan Lingyue wanted to build a prosperous and huge empire for Mingyu. However, this road was paved with the corpses of the soldiers and people of the Great Xia. Even the 300,000 soldiers of the Northern Meng army would become the sacrifice of the former's ideals. He couldn't say that Fan Lingyue's actions were definitely wrong. War itself was a sin, and there had never been a side that was absolutely righteous. Moreover, no one knew if this ideal century of prosperity would come. Even Fan Lingyue himself couldn't be sure. Just like how he couldn't convince Fan Lingyue couldn't convince him either. He couldn't accept Fan Lingyue's actions of sacrificing millions of lives for an ideal that he didn't know if it could be realized. It had nothing to do with right or wrong. It was just that their ideals were different. In the history of Wuxia, even the most powerful dynasty couldn't unify the world. 100 generations of prosperity was merely an unattainable goal for the emperors of each dynasty. No one had truly achieved it. While thinking, the long night gradually passed. At dawn, Ning Chen walked out of the room. The Marquis was already waiting in front of the battle array. Today would be the most critical moment in the war between the two dynasties. The future of the Great Xia and the Northern Meng would depend on the confrontation between the two people today. The Marquis didn't know if the young man in front of him could shoulder this burden, but he believed in the Empress' decision. Neither of them spoke. Accompanied by the clattering footsteps of the 5,000 imperial soldiers, they walked toward the north step by step. The two armies were only 30 miles apart. After 2 hours, the northern Meng camp was already in front of them. Qin Wuyo's heavy cavalry was also in formation. The black heavy armor emitted a deep chill under the sunlight, causing people to feel cold all over. In between the two armies, there was a pavilion that stood alone. In the past, it sheltered people from the wind and rain. Today, it would become the place where the two dynasties clashed. Fan Lingyue sat quietly in the pavilion. She was dressed in a light blue robe. Her long hair was casually tied behind her back. Her beautiful face was calm, without the slightest ripple. The three generals stood outside the pavilion, respectfully guarding the belief of the Northern Meng imperial court. The Marquis accompanied Ning Chen to the pavilion, but he stopped in his tracks. The main character today wasn't him, but the woman in the pavilion and the Marquis Jiming beside him. Ning Chen walked into the pavilion and looked at the woman who was quietly brewing tea in front of the stone table. He didn't disturb her. "Please." Fan Lingyue poured a cup of tea and pushed it in front of Ning Chen. "Many thanks." Ning Chen picked up the tea and tasted it. It was slightly bitter in the mouth, but it instantly left a fragrance. The tea was good, but the tea maker's skills were even better. It was a calm and peaceful scene, and no one could see any tension or conflict. Since the two of them had known each other, they had appreciated each other's talents and wanted to get rid of each other at all costs. Neither of them had shown any falsehood or hesitation. They had feelings, but they had never shown mercy. Chapter 108. Outside the pavilion, Marquis Bloodclad and the three generals were waiting calmly without any emotion. They all knew that this confrontation would last for a long time. Every decision made by the two people in the pavilion would affect the future of the two dynasties. Northern Meng and Great Xia had been fighting for so long, and the situation was clear. Northern Meng obviously had the upper hand. Therefore, Northern Meng still had the initiative in this negotiation. Fan Lingyue had single-handedly pushed Great Xia into its current precarious situation. This time, the assassination of the Xia emperor had caused this 1,000-year-old dynasty to have the tendency to fall apart. Ning Chen was very clear that the death of the Xia emperor was definitely related to Fan Lingyue. This stab was too ruthless and too timely. Back then, if the Xia emperor had died on that mountain, Great Xia would not have reached its current state. At that time, the two princes' wings were not fully grown yet. Furthermore, the Xia emperor had fallen off the cliff and disappeared. No one could be sure whether he was dead or alive. Most of the nobles in the court chose to observe and did not dare to take sides easily. And now, the third prince and the 10th prince had already established their power. Their power spread throughout the court. If they wanted to remove them, Great Xia would definitely suffer a great loss. Human nature was greedy. For the sake of that dragon throne, there were times when people would do anything. Fan Lingyue was the best at grasping people's hearts. Step by step, she pushed Great Xia into a mountain of blades and a sea of flames. Great Xia could not avoid it and could only endure. In the pavilion, the two people each had their own thoughts. However, on the surface, they were still calm as they brewed tea and tasted it. Other than being enemies, they were also friends in the past. "How's the taste?" Fan Lingyue asked softly. "It's slightly bitter in the mouth and sweet in the aftertaste." "It's good tea," Ning Chen commented. This tea comes from northern Meng's Yinwu mountain. The environment there is extremely cold, so the taste of the tea is different from the rest, Fan Lingyue explained as she poured another cup of tea and pushed it in front of Ning Chen. I really didn't expect you to have such outstanding attainments in the art of tea in the Central Plains, Ning Chen said emotionally. The art of tea was easy to learn but not perfect. It required a lot of time and energy to practice. However, this principle seemed to have no effect on Fan Lingyue. He really wanted to know if there was anything in the world that this woman could not do. Hearing the praise in Ning Chen's words, Fan Lingyue smiled faintly. She studied the culture of the Central Plains for no other reason than to better understand this beautiful land. Only by knowing yourself and your enemy would you be able to win 100 battles. Is Mingyue alright? Fan Lingyue lowered his head and asked while making tea. I can eat and sleep. I can't be any better, Ning Chen replied. Then I'm relieved, Fan Lingyue replied softly, then continued, I really didn't expect that you would be able to barge into Northern Meng's imperial palace and kidnap Mingyue. Fortunately, Emperor Xia is also dead, so we can be considered to be tied. You sent concubine Wan, didn't you? Ning Chen asked. Yes. Fan Lingyue didn't deny it. Who is she? Ning Chen asked the question that he had never dared to confirm. Qing family's eldest daughter, Qing Wuhan, Fan Lingyue replied honestly. As expected. Ning Chen sighed inwardly. When he was in Northern Meng's capital, he had heard that Qing family's eldest daughter hadn't shown herself for 9 years. At that time, he didn't take it to heart. It was only when Emperor Xia was assassinated that he thought of this matter again. The timing of Qin Wuhan's disappearance and concubine Wan's entry into the palace was too coincidental. No matter how he looked at it, it was suspicious. The army behind you is too close to Beichui city. Mingyue is afraid of noise, so you should retreat a little, Ning Chen took a sip of tea and said very naturally. How much? Fan Lingyue poured another cup for him and asked. Like before, 200 li, Ning Chen said after thinking for a while. Alright, but I want to see Mingyue, Fan Lingyue said. Ning Chen didn't immediately agree and said, this matter is a little troublesome. I need to think about it. He had to be more careful with this woman in front of him. Right now, little Mingyue was his only advantage, and he couldn't afford any mistakes. The Northern Meng army will retreat when you've thought it through. Of course, the limit is 3 days, Fan Lingyue said calmly. Ning Chen nodded. He needed to make some preparations to prevent any accidents from happening. Let me remind you, the old monk in the southwest is about to be unable to sit still. You also know that if those monks stop meditating and chanting, it won't be a good thing for Great Xia. Fan Lingyue suddenly changed the topic. Hearing this, Ning Chen's hand that was holding the cup suddenly paused. This was a huge matter. Once that old monk took action, Great Xia's southwest border might not be able to be protected. Although Marquis Wanchuan's strength was second only to Marquis Kaixuan, it wasn't enough to contend against a 3-disaster Xiantian expert. Du Yi Temple wasn't just a simple temple. It was a Buddhist country with over 10,000 disciples and was extremely difficult to deal with. Fan Lingyue, if you drive the tiger to devour the wolf like this, you'll draw fire to yourself sooner or later, Ning Chen warned as his face gradually darkened. You don't have to worry about this. Since I have the ability to drive the tiger, I also have the ability to kill the tiger. You should think about how to tell your empress about this matter, Fan Lingyue said, unmoved. The worry in Ning Chen's eyes was difficult to conceal. Just the matters in the imperial city were already very difficult for Zhang Sun. If another problem occurred in the southwest of Great Xia, Zhang Sun might really not be able to hold on. Fan Lingyue, you've brought so much war to the world. Even if you win the war, the ones who will suffer are still the people of the 2 dynasties, Ning Chen sighed softly. Life is full of emotions. First it's bitter, then it's sweet. If you don't experience the bitter end, how can you cherish the sweet end? Just like this tea, if it's sweet as soon as it enters your mouth, the aftertaste will just be a dull aftertaste, Fan Lingyue said indifferently. But life isn't like tasting tea. Even after suffering, it doesn't mean that happiness will come. You can't decide the lives of others, Ning Chen said in a low voice. Fan Lingyue glanced at the former, a hint of mockery flashing across her beautiful face. In this world, it has always been the strong dominating the weak. Are you really so naive as to think that everyone can decide their own fate? Ning Chen was silent, not replying. Fan Lingyue stood up, his eyes turned to the south as he continued, the weak depend on the strong, and the strong depend on the stronger. This is the nature of humans. It's impossible for there to be absolute fairness in the world. Also, what the weak want isn't fairness. What they need is an expert who can guide them. Since they want something, they naturally have to pay the price. Speaking up to here, Fan Lingyue turned and looked at Ning Chen. She said calmly, Jiming Marquis, what do you think the Xia Emperor meant by giving you this title? He wants you to know your destiny and know your place. In the eyes of the Xia Emperor, you are nothing more than a servant. No matter how talented you are, you can't escape the status of a servant. The Xia Emperor is a strong person, so he has the authority to do this. And you can only accept it. Ning Chen sighed softly. He couldn't refute that. What Fan Lingyue said was the truth, and there was nothing to argue about. Fan Lingyue saw everything clearly, but because of this, she was very cold to everything. She only cared about the end result. As for the process in the middle, it was meaningless to her. Just like the millions of civilians in Yengue City, their deaths were only because Fan Lingyue didn't want to waste too many soldiers in Yengue City. Massacring the city was the simplest and most effective method. In the history of Wuxia, such things had happened before. In the most powerful Yuan dynasty, the Mongol cavalry had massacred many cities because they didn't have any extra soldiers left. He couldn't refute Fan Lingyue's way of doing things, but he also couldn't agree with it. Their different ideologies were the main reason why the distance between them was growing. Fan Lingyue, I admit that I can't convince you. However, I'll still say the same thing. I'll do everything I can to stop you. Ning Chen stood up and looked at the beautiful but emotionless face of the woman in front of him, and said seriously. I hope you can do it. Fan Lingyue said calmly. The atmosphere of the conversation had already turned stiff. There was no point in continuing. Ning Chen cupped his fists and said goodbye, then turned and left. Today's negotiation had just begun. Even so, the information he received was enough to give Zhang Sun a headache. When he met that little bald donkey in northern Meng, he already felt strange. He didn't expect that Fan Lingyue would really drag the Du Yi temple into the war. After Ning Chen left, in the pavilion, Fan Lingyue picked up a cup of tea. Just as she was about to drink it, she suddenly coughed violently. The tea was dyed red in an instant. If possible, she really wanted to borrow another 10 years of time from the heavens. Then, she had 100% confidence that she would be able to build a huge empire for northern Meng. On the other side, after Ning Chen returned to Beichui City, he immediately wrote a letter about today's matter and sent it to the imperial city. Especially the matter of the Du Yi temple, he repeatedly warned Zhang Sun to be careful. There were well-trained messenger eagles in the army. They were extremely fast and could deliver the news within a day. He didn't know if he could make it in time, but this matter had to be told to Zhang Sun. It wasn't that there weren't any people in Great Xia who could stop the abbot of the Du Yi temple. At the very least, he knew of 2 people who could do it. However, whether or not they could be persuaded would depend on Zhang Sun's ability. For monsters like Xiantian, unless they were willing, no one could force them to do anything. A rank 9 expert could be killed by a large number of people, but only Xiantian could stop Tian. Little Mingyu waited quietly at the side. After seeing that Ning Chen was done with his business, she walked over and tugged at his sleeve. Ning Chen then remembered that little Mingyu was still eagerly waiting for the result. Thus, he smiled apologetically and told the little girl about the negotiation conditions between him and Fan Lingyue in detail. "Do you want to see her?" After speaking, Ning Chen rubbed little Mingyu's hair and asked. "Yes," Mingyu answered honestly. She grew up under the care of Sister Lingyue. Unfortunately, ever since the war between the two dynasties began, they never had the chance to meet again. "I need to prepare. This Sister Lingyue of yours is too powerful. I'm afraid that she will snatch you away the moment I bring you out," Ning Chen said helplessly. He had suffered enough in the hands of Fan Lingyue, so he had to be extra careful. Mingyu didn't answer. She was very conflicted now. She didn't know if she should hope to be rescued by Sister Lingyue. Although she was a hostage, the bad guys treated her really well. They didn't even hesitate to risk their lives to protect her. Moreover, she felt more and more that this war shouldn't continue. She didn't have extravagant hopes that Northern Meng could defeat Great Xia. She only hoped that these soldiers of Northern Meng could return to their country safely. Chapter 109. Zhang Xuan's reply arrived the next day, asking Ning Chen to delay Fan Lingyue and the Northern Meng army no matter what. As for the southwest of the Great Xia, she would ask the dean of the academy to deal with it. After reading the letter, Ning Chen was temporarily relieved. With the dean holding back the abbot of Du Yi Temple, the situation in the southwest of the Great Xia would not worsen in a short time. King Yan's return to the palace was of great significance to the Great Xia. This was also the key reason why Zhangsun could let the dean go to the southwest border without worry. The reason was simple: the imperial city or the academy must have an absolute master in charge. The situation in the southwest was no longer his concern, so he could concentrate on thinking about how to deal with Fan Lingyue's request. Logically speaking, with the Marquis of Bloody Robe, a half-step to inborn master, and 2 ninth-rank imperial guards in the barracks, there should be no problem in meeting. However, he was still a little worried. Fan Lingyue's intelligence was too terrifying, so no matter how careful he was, it would not be too much. Fortunately, the young general had to stay in Heaven's Gate, so Fan Lingyue had lost a great help. Last time, Emperor Xia buried gunpowder under Marquis Jiming to kill him. Unfortunately, the power of the things developed by the Heavenly Workshop was limited, so he was lucky to escape. However, this method should be good to deal with Fan Lingyue. If he could take this opportunity to kill this woman, it would be the best result, and the Great Xia would have one less terrifying enemy. Without Fan Lingyue, the Northern Meng army was like a tiger without its teeth, its threat reduced by 70%. Thinking of this, Ning Chen wrote down the required medicine and handed it to a general to secretly buy it in the city. It was already night time in the city, and the lights were bright. Although the Northern Meng army was just 30 miles away, and the atmosphere in the city was a little tense, the people still had to live, so everything was not much different from usual. The moon rose and the night deepened. Ning Chen walked to the tower and looked at the Northern Meng army in silence. When the patrolling soldiers saw Ning Chen, they did not dare to disturb him. This was the new Jiming Marquis, the ruthless person who dared to kidnap the Northern Meng emperor. It was said that the main character of this negotiation was not the Marquis of Bloody Robe, but the Jiming Marquis in front of him. After waiting for a while, Ning Chen took out the broken death bow and aimed it at Bei Meng's tent in the distance. The silver arrow condensed, and in an instant, a powerful pressure spread out. He knew that this arrow wouldn't be able to kill Fan Lingyue. However, Fan Lingyue's body wasn't in good condition. If he could injure her, it was likely that her remaining life would be reduced by a little. He had said that he would do everything in his power to stop her. Between him and Fan Lingyue, there was no such thing as despicable or not. As long as they could get rid of the other party, neither of them would hesitate for a moment. The silver arrow became more and more resplendent, and the pressure on the city gate tower became heavier and heavier. The moment the arrow was released, a person slowly walked over from afar. Ning Chen's expression turned cold. Without hesitation, he changed the direction of the arrow and shot it at the attacker. In this world, if there were people he had to kill, then the person in front of him was one of them. Beimeng's 4 engraved swords. The silver arrow light streaked across the void, leaving behind a bright arrow tail. The arrow light was filled with killing intent, causing the surrounding space to distort. Si Mingjian's footsteps didn't stop. A blood-colored sword appeared in his hand. With a swing of the sword, he dispersed the deadly arrow. In a battle of speed, the sword was fast, but the arrow was even faster. When the arrow dissipated, another arrow light shot toward him. In Si Mingjian's other hand, a golden sword appeared and blocked the arrow light flying toward him again. Ning Chen didn't think that these 2 arrows could hurt Si Mingjian. Therefore, he shot the 3rd arrow. The arrow was like a meteor. At the most beautiful moment, Si Mingjian frowned slightly and stepped back to avoid the arrow light. Unexpectedly, after the 3rd arrow, the 4th and 5th arrows arrived at the same time. The 3 arrows were connected and converged into the most terrifying line, instantly tearing the void around him. The blood-colored sword and the golden sword blocked the first 2 arrows, but they couldn't block the last arrow in time. In the next moment, Si Mingjian's vital energy burst out and resisted the powerful 5th arrow. Whoosh! His vital energy vibrated. Without a doubt, it was at the half-step innate level. The arrow light was blocked and deviated, brushing past Si Mingjian's shoulder. Blood spilled out and dyed his clothes red. Si Mingjian frowned again and the killing intent in his heart grew stronger. This kid's growth was too fast. The last time they met, he was so weak that he couldn't even withstand a single blow. Today, he could already injure him. On the city wall, Ning Chen squinted his eyes. This person had become stronger again. Unfortunately, he could only shoot 5 arrows now. A distance of 1,000 feet was nothing to a half-step innate. Si Mingjian stomped his feet and flew up. The blood-colored moon appeared in the sky and slashed toward Ning Chen. At this moment, a blood-colored figure flashed past and punched the blood-colored moon. The blood-colored clothes were dazzling and fluttering in the wind. It was the Marquis of Wuxia. In the meeting between the two, the head disciple of Imperial Advisor Bei Meng was fighting against the Marquis of Wuxia. Between the two, powerful shockwaves continued to wreak havoc, causing the soldiers on the city wall to continuously retreat. Ning Chen looked at the battle between the two. Just as he was about to intervene, his body suddenly stopped and his expression changed. Marquis of Wuxia, I'll leave this place to you. The situation was critical. Ning Chen didn't have time to say anything. His body flashed and he rushed toward the mayor's mansion. The Marquis of Wuxia did not answer. Although he could suppress Si Mingjian, he was still a half-step innate expert. He couldn't escape in a short time. Ning Chen moved faster and faster. After reaching the mayor's mansion, he didn't stop and directly rushed to his and Xiao Mingyu's residence. Now that he and the Marquis of Wuxia had entered the mayor's mansion, they were surrounded by the imperial guards. However, he still felt that something was wrong. Pushing open the door, he saw that Xiao Mingyu was still sleeping on the bed without any surprise. Ning Chen was relieved. Fortunately, he was overthinking. However, at this moment, a sword light came silently without any warning. It was merciless. In the sudden crisis, Ning Chen only had time to see the shadow reflected by the moonlight. He subconsciously turned his body and saw the long sword piercing his shoulder and coming out of his body. The sword pierced through his body, bringing out a large amount of blood. Ning Chen's body staggered and his left hand grabbed the sword edge. At the same time, he endured the pain and forced himself to turn around. He turned back and hit the assassin's chest with his palm. Bang! The black-clothed figure met the attack with his palm and blocked the palm in front of his heart. Waves of the World East. Facing each other in close proximity, Ning Chen fully strengthened his body. Blue light gathered around his body and the power of his palm increased by 30%. The powerful palm power was unstoppable. The black-clothed figure decisively abandoned his sword and retreated 30 feet to avoid this powerful attack. He didn't want to fight. Ning Chen stepped out of the room. With a shake of his left hand, the sword flew out and fell to the ground. He waved his hand and closed the door. He immediately turned around and looked at the assassin with a cold expression. Fan Lingyue sent you. Did she tell you to leave immediately after saving Mingyu? You think you're smart, but you're really stupid. At the end, a cold smile flashed across Ning Chen's face. Fan Lingyue was such a smart person and knew what was important. If she wanted to kill him, she wouldn't choose this time. He had to admit that the person in front of him was really stupid. What Sword City wants to do is not allowed to be told by others. The black-clothed figure pulled out another sword from behind and said coldly. Oh. Are you a disciple of Sword City? Second or third? Ning Chen was slightly surprised. No wonder he dared to go against Fan Lingyue's orders. So he wasn't from Northern Meng. Third sword, Jian Luiying. The black-clothed figure's tone carried a trace of arrogance. Idiot. Before he finished speaking, Ning Chen's figure had already disappeared. His ink sword flew out and was held in his hand. He stabbed it at the person in front of him. Clang! The two swords collided. Sword chi scattered in all directions. The stone tiles around the two were riddled with holes by the scattered sword chi. It was an evenly matched move. There was no winner or loser. Even if Jian Luiying's cultivation was higher, Ning Chen's foundation was superior. Jian Luiying was shocked. He didn't think that a mere 8th-rank youth would have such strength. Such a foundation was rare in the world. Ning Chen wasn't in the mood to care about what Jian Luiying was thinking. He moved his sword and used his ultimate move. Suddenly, a shocking wave swept out, splitting the sky. First defense, shocking wave splits 10,000 li. This shocking move was unparalleled. Jian Luiying also used his strongest move. Thousands of green light turned into a majestic sword flow that met the shocking wave. It was as if the earth had been struck by a heavenly tribulation. The earth trembled and collapsed. Even the house shook. The commotion attracted the attention of the two imperial army commanders in the residence, and they quickly rushed over. Seeing this, Jian Luiying's heart sank. He immediately turned into a ray of light and left. The two imperial guard leaders wanted to chase after him but were stopped by Ning Chen. There's no need to chase. You're not his match. Be more careful in the future. Don't let today's situation happen again. After saying this, Ning Chen put away his sword and turned to walk back into the house. The two imperial guard leaders accepted the order and left the small courtyard, returning to their posts. In the room, little Mingyu had already woken up. It would be strange if she didn't wake up when they were fighting outside. Ning Chen was a bit scared. Luckily, little Mingyu hadn't gone missing. Otherwise, things would have gotten out of hand. You're injured. Mingyu looked at the blood on his left shoulder. Her face flashed with worry. It's nothing. It's just a normal meal. Ning Chen walked forward and rubbed the little girl's hair. He was telling the truth. Ever since he came to this world, he had been injured the most. He couldn't even count the big and small injuries on his body. There were too many people who wanted to kill him, and they were all powerful people in this world. It was inevitable that he would be injured. Northern Meng Army Camp C. Ming Jian and Jian Luiying rushed back together. Fan Lingyue was waiting in front of the tent. When she saw that only the two of them had returned, her expression immediately turned cold. I need an explanation. Fan Lingyue said coldly. A half-step Xiantian and a peak 9th grade. She had even told them what to do. How could they still fail? Humph. Jian Luiying didn't want to say more. He was about to go back to rest when he saw a slender hand reaching for his life. Jian Luiying was shocked. He moved his hand and hurriedly blocked the attack. Bang! The slender hand was weak, but it was unstoppable. With a bang, the former was pushed back. Did I say you could leave? Fan Lingyue said coldly. Jian Luiying's body swayed and he vomited a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with shock. The Northern Meng Army advisor was actually a peak 9th grade martial artist. Chapter 110. In front of the commander's tent, Jian Luiying's arrogant expression was much more restrained after receiving that palm strike. He honestly explained the situation just now. Fan Lingyue's mood was very bad. Among the 3 disciples of Sword City, Jian Luiying, who was ranked 3rd, was the best at hiding. He was originally the best candidate, but she didn't expect that he would become her biggest failure. Ning Chen was a smart person. If he failed this time, it would be even more difficult to rescue Ming Yu next time. Both of them were injured. It could be seen how intense the previous battle was. You may leave. Someone will deliver medicine later. Fan Lingyue waved her hand and sighed. Jian Luiying and Si Mingjian cupped their fists and bowed before leaving. Fan Lingyue stood in front of the tent and quietly looked at Sword City in the east. Since Jian Luiying had already arrived, she should be arriving soon too. The 3-day deadline was quickly approaching. Tomorrow was the last day. Ning Chen sent a messenger to deliver a letter. In the letter, he expressed his intense anger at what happened last night. In the end, he didn't hide his distrust of her at all, stating that he could only accept a meeting in front of Beichui City. Fan Lingyue replied with an apology. Her words were sincere, explaining that she didn't manage her troops well enough and that her subordinates acted on their own. In order to express her apology, he could choose the meeting location. Both of them knew what was going on, but they didn't fall out. They continued to feign civility and temporarily maintained the possibility of negotiation. After Ning Chen finished reading the letter, he laughed coldly and crushed the letter into pieces. He and Fan Lingyue were both people who should go to hell. No matter how well they hid it, they couldn't hide the hypocrisy and coldness in their bones. The night wind was cold. There was no emotion in their eyes as they looked at each other. There was only ruthless killing intent. In the first round, Fan Lingyue's mistake was in using the right people. Ning Chen luckily escaped. It was luck, but also a warning in his heart. In this world, the people who understood each other the most were friends and enemies. The 2 of them were once friends, but now they were enemies. They already understood each other thoroughly. However, understanding was one thing. The final outcome was still unpredictable. Man proposes, but God disposes. No matter how smart a person was, it was impossible to plan everything perfectly. There would always be unexpected variables. At the very beginning, Ning Chen's sudden appearance disrupted many of Fan Lingyue's plans. Now that the battlefield was facing each other and both sides knew each other's strengths, this advantage had already disappeared. In the end, the competition would return to a contest of wits and schemes. The lights in the city were as beautiful as ever. The Imperial Army was on high alert. Everywhere one looked, one could see the figures of the Imperial Army. Ning Chen was deep in thought, carefully recalling what else he hadn't thought of. When facing Fan Lingyue, even the slightest flaw could cause him to be consigned to eternal damnation. He had to be watertight. Little Ming Yu's mood sank. She knew that tomorrow was the day they would meet, but she didn't feel happy at all. The villain's silence made her feel uneasy. She had a feeling that something bad would happen the next day. The little girl's senses were very sensitive. Even though Ning Chen had tried his best to hide the worry in his heart, he still couldn't hide it from Ming Yu's eyes. Actually, little Mingyu was the one who was in the most difficult position. She was sandwiched between the two of them and didn't know who to hope for. Ning Chen thought for an entire night and didn't notice any flaws. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. The sun rose and the first rays of the morning sun shone on the earth, illuminating a beautiful golden world. The gate of the city lord's residence opened. Amidst the respectful welcome of the imperial army, Ning Chen walked out with little Mingyu and walked towards the city gate tower. In this meeting, everyone had their own plans and schemes. As for the result, they could only leave it to fate. The imperial army was ready to set off. The soldiers in the city were also on high alert to deal with any accidents that could happen at any time. The ground in front of the city wall was filled with gunpowder. Only Ning Chen and Marquis blood-robed knew about it. Ning Chen was very clear that when they met, Fan Lingyue would definitely be very careful. He didn't have many chances, so Marquis blood-robed was the most suitable person to ignite it. Holding hands, they walked out of the city and waited below the city. On the city wall, Marquis blood-robed stood with rapt attention, ready to listen to the former's signal at any time and shoot this crucial arrow. In the distance, the northern Meng heavy cavalry walked over with heavy steps. Qin Wuyo was leading the team, wearing heavy armor and full of killing intent. When the two sides were 1,000 feet apart, the northern Meng heavy cavalry all dismounted and knelt down in front of Mingyu. "Long live your majesty, long live your majesty, long live your majesty." The armor clanged, but it couldn't stop the heavy cavalry's determination to kneel down. Fan Lingyue was strict in managing the army, and no one was an exception. "Rise." The scene was extremely quiet. Mingyu's expression was indifferent as she spoke calmly. Although she was young, the majesty of an emperor was already fully displayed. "Thank you, your majesty." The heavy cavalry stood up and stood upright. Looking at the dense square formation in front of him, Ning Chen sighed. How could the current army break through? At this moment, two unhurried footsteps came from afar. The heavy cavalry slowly separated, respectfully welcoming the two most respected people today. Blue clothes fluttered in the wind, white clothes like snow. The same beautiful face, the same cold expression, but it brought Ning Chen the greatest surprise. The beautiful figure coming toward him didn't have a trace of emotion. The scenes of the past had all turned into smoke. The most unexpected meeting came so suddenly, like a sharp knife stabbing into his heart again. Ning Chen's heart ached. It was the same as when they first met. Little Mingyu felt that something was wrong with the bad guy, and gently shook his arm. Ning Chen came back to his senses. The hand he raised hesitated, and he couldn't wave it down. On the city tower, Marquis Bloodrobed also felt that something was wrong with the former. He didn't wait for a hint, and directly shot an arrow at the place where the gunpowder was buried. Heaven and earth exploded, and a series of explosions resounded outside the north-hanging city. The terrifying power was earth-shattering, and turned the area hundreds of feet in front into a sea of fire. However, Ning Chen was the one who understood the properties of gunpowder the most in this world. He didn't randomly choose the most suitable time to detonate it. Unfortunately, Ning Chen hesitated. When Marquis Bloodrobed detonated the gunpowder, it was already too late. Mu Qingxue was an upper sky, and Fan Lingyue was a 9th grade absolute peak. After the first explosion, they immediately sped up and disappeared. The subsequent explosions couldn't catch up with the two figures. When meeting on the battlefield, there was no room for hesitation. In the fire all over the sky, a cold sword light appeared and pierced toward Ning Chen. The shadow-bearing sword of the Sword City was the fastest sword in this world, and Mu Qingxue, who had the travel scroll, was the fastest person in this world. Ning Chen couldn't dodge this sword. At this critical moment, no one would have thought that a small body would block the sword without hesitation. Subconsciously, without any thoughts, Mingyu just felt that the bad guy was in danger, so she blocked in front. Little Mingyu didn't know martial arts, so her reaction was naturally not as fast as a martial artist. However, she had already taken this step when the explosion sounded, and when the sword light came, she blocked it. The little girl's intuition was terrifyingly sharp. She was born as an emperor, and no matter how weak she usually appeared in front of Ning Chen, she was still an emperor. Her judgment of things had long surpassed her age. Mu Qingshue's sword target was Ning Chen's Dantian Ocean of Qi, but it was blocked by little Mingyu. The extremely fast sword was suddenly retracted, and Bai Yi returned, standing 100 feet away. At this moment, Fan Lingyue had also arrived. Looking at little Mingyu in front of Ning Chen, her expression was ugly. Mingyu, you. Fan Lingyue didn't expect that Mingyu would block in front of Ning Chen at the most critical moment. Sister Lingyue. Little Mingyu's face was filled with longing, grievance, and a trace of stubbornness. Fan Lingyue was angry and didn't pay attention to her. Looking at Mu Qingxue, she said, "Kill him and save Mingyu. The previous favor will be written off." "Kill or save," Mu Qingxue said indifferently. "Save." Fan Lingyue didn't bargain, and made a prompt decision. Hearing this, Mu Qingxue moved, and his sword moved like a swan, striking out again. Bang! At the same time, the ground shook, and a bloody figure jumped down from the city, blocking Mu Qingxue's path. The two forbidden army leaders followed, wanting to help, but they were stopped by Ning Chen. "Take care of Mingyu." Ning Chen handed little Mingyu to the two, and then he walked forward, looking at Fan Lingyue. At this point, there should be an end between them. Mu Qingxue's arrival was out of his expectations. So the favor he was talking about in the past was owed to Fan Lingyue. At that time, Emperor Xia hadn't died, and the favor remained until today. He failed. The scar in his heart was finally caught by Fan Lingyue, and it was fiercely torn open, dripping with blood. The white-clothed figure in the breeze was so fast that people couldn't see his figure. The blood-clothed figure was not afraid, and blood-red light circulated around his body, as if he was a god of war. Two strong people met, one was fast, one was strong. Mu Qingxue was the first person in the younger generation to enter the Xiantian realm, and Marquis blood-clothed was a peerless expert who could fight against a martial lord for a short period of time. Marquis blood-clothed was already infinitely close to the Xiantian realm, and even the last half of his foot was almost there. In addition to his tyrannical battle talent, his strength had always been in the top 3 among the 10 martial marquises of the Grand Xiao. Blood-clothed was the imperial court's title for Marquis blood-clothed, and it was also a type of recognition. Although Mu Qingxue was in Xiantian, he hadn't stepped into that realm for long. Facing the tyrannical Marquis blood-clothed, he couldn't win immediately. Ning Chen and Fan Lingyue also met. From knowing each other to wanting to kill each other, today, the result of this battle would be decided. Ning Shuang's sword streaked across an ink-colored brilliance, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived before Fan Lingyue without any mercy. Clang! Fan Lingyue's delicate hand blocked the edge of the sword, and a strange air circulated around her body. The sword and palm collided, and the ink-colored sword's frost instantly dissipated. Ning Chen only felt that the true qi in his body was quickly drained away from the sword's edge. Bang! Fan Lingyue's palm struck out, forcing Ning Chen to retreat. Ugh, pu. Ning Chen retreated a few steps, his body swayed, and he vomited a mouthful of blood, dyeing the ground in front of him red. What a strange martial technique. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. This woman's martial technique was actually able to exhaust his true qi. Fan Lingyue didn't care about the former shock, and her delicate hand once again arrived. It was as white as jade, but at this moment, it became the most terrifying weapon. It was filled with killing intent, as if it wanted to take one's life. Ning Chen moved his body to the side, and in the next moment, the true qi on his finger disappeared. As expected. Ning Chen quickly retreated, and retreated 3 feet away, his eyes constantly flickering. Chapter 111. Fan Lingyue's martial arts could indeed drain the true qi of the person he came in contact with, be it the sword or the body. Moreover, the longer the contact, the faster the true qi would be drained. The military advisor of Northern Meng was indeed the scariest person in the world. Fan Lingyue had almost no weakness in terms of wisdom or martial arts. He made all his opponents feel powerless. The ink sword in Ning Chen's hand condensed frost again. Snowflakes drifted around him. His figure flashed and his sword pierced through the air. Fan Lingyue's figure also came forward. White light circulated in his hand as he reached for the ink sword. Clang! The moment the sword and the palm met, the ink sword left without stopping. On the tip of the sword, a wisp of frost disappeared, and quickly condensed back. Ning Chen chose to drag the battle without hesitation. He wanted to consume as little true qi as possible. He knew that Fan Lingyue's body was unwell and he could not fight for a long time. This was also his only chance. The battle between the two sides became more and more intense. On Marquis' blood-robed side, the battle between strength and speed had reached the most white-hot level. The blood-stained clothes made him even more powerful. Between the moves, bloody light shone brightly. A large area of the void was distorted and cracks appeared, as if it could collapse at any time. Mu Qingshue's sword was so fast that even its afterimage could not be seen clearly. All that could be seen in the sky was a flash of white light. Bright blood steel, condense. Amidst the brilliant light, a blood-colored steel appeared in the sky. It had a radius of 100 feet. The blood-colored light soared into the sky, giving off a sense of oppression that only an innate master could have. Mu Qingshue's body felt like it was stuck in a quagmire. His speed decreased by 30%. Marquis blood-robed raised the bright blood steel and turned his palm to suppress the speed. The battle was not going well. Mu Qingxue retreated 100 feet and soared into the sky. The shadow-bearing sword spun rapidly. The mist in the sky turned into sword qi and formed a pair of dazzling snow-colored wings behind him. Sword leaving traces. In a short moment, the beautiful figure in the sky had already disappeared. The sword left a trace and instantly arrived in front of blood-robed. Swish! Blood splattered and Marquis blood-robe's body was dyed red again. Marquis blood-robed did not retreat at all. Instead, he used his palm to meet the sword. Bang! The snow-colored wings were affected by the palm wind, and a small part of them fell off. Mu Qingxue raised his sword to block the attack, but his body was sent flying 30 meters away by the huge force. 10 sword strikes for 1 palm strike. Marquis blood-robe's every strike was swift and fierce. Eventually, Mu Qingxue was unable to dodge. His blood and qi were boiling inside his body. Although he was not injured, he was still affected. While Marquis blood-clad and Mu Qingxue were locked in battle, Ning Chen's side also encountered trouble. The more Fan Lingyue fought, the stronger she became. Her cultivation technique was raised to the peak, and white light shone around her. Every step she took was brilliant, and every move she made was powerful. She was like a goddess descending to the world, suppressing him to the point that he felt like he couldn't break through. The frost essence of the ink sword dissipated upon contact. Within the white light, the true qi was rapidly drained away. Ning Chen retreated again and again, feeling depressed. Ever since he started practicing martial arts, this was the first time he was in such a sorry state. Fan Lingyue didn't hold back in the slightest, suppressing him step by step and forcing him to take his life with every move. He wanted to get rid of this great calamity today. Absolute suppression caused this battle to have no suspense, and the outcome would be decided very soon. However, at this moment, there was a sudden change. Fan Lingyue's body suddenly stopped, and she coughed violently. The white light around her also dissipated rapidly. Her sick body couldn't withstand the exhaustion of a long battle, and began to show signs of exhaustion. First defense, raging waves splitting 10,000 miles. This was a rare opportunity. Ning Chen's eyes focused. His sword raised 100 zhang tall wave, and in the midst of the raging waves, a sword slashed through the sky. In the loud explosion, the world was miserable. Sand and dust flew wildly, covering the vision of everyone in the surroundings. In the midst of the sand and dust, the white light rose again. When the sword and the palm collided, Fan Lingyue let out a muffled groan, and retreated a few steps. Then, she used her delicate hand to disperse the force, and struck out with her palm. With a bang, Ning Chen was sent flying again, and blood spurted out. After landing on the ground, he stabbed his sword into the ground and barely managed to stabilize his body. Cough cough. Fan Lingyue coughed violently, and blood kept flowing out from between her fingers. The white light around her body also began to become extremely unstable, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. Seeing this, Mu Qingxue frowned. His figure flashed, and a sword light slashed towards Ning Chen. Soon after, he swept Fan Lingyue away from the battle. At the same time, Marquis Bloodrobed arrived and blocked the sword light. Looking at the two who retreated, his eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Ning Chen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and shook his head with difficulty. This battle was too embarrassing. If it wasn't for Fan Lingyue's body being unable to withstand the exhaustion of a long battle, he would have lost without a doubt. The heavens were still fair. They gave Fan Lingyue frightening intelligence and martial talent, and also gave her a sickly body. The northern Ming army retreated in a grandiose manner. The soldiers in the city heaved a sigh of relief. The pressure from the 10,000 heavy cavalry was too strong. It was like a flood of iron that wanted to swallow everything in front of it. After the cavalry retreated, Marquis Bloodrobed brought Ning Chen back to the city lord's mansion. Both of them were injured and needed to recuperate. Especially Ning Chen, who received 2 palm strikes from Fan Lingyue. After returning, he kept coughing out blood. Little Mingyu stayed by his bedside, silently serving him soup and medicine. Her sad little face never smiled again. In the northern Ming army, Fan Lingyue wasn't any better. Half of her blue clothes were dyed red with blood, looking very miserable. Retreat. Half a day later, a military order was issued. The army retreated 200 miles according to the agreement. Marquis, Northern Meng has retreated. Outside the room, a general sent a message, informing him of the situation. Got it. Ning Chen leaned on the bed and said tiredly. He wasn't surprised about the retreat. Fan Lingyue was a proud person. Since she promised to retreat, she would definitely retreat. Scheming was scheming, and promises were promises. They were not the same thing. He had told so many lies in his life that he couldn't remember them all, but he had never forgotten the promises he made. He and Fan Lingyue were still similar people. Aside from the concealment on the outside, they still had their own pride in their bones. A distance of 200 miles wasn't much, but it was enough to let the soldiers and commoners in the city breathe a sigh of relief, reducing a lot of pressure. This war wouldn't end too quickly. If this pressure continued, the soldiers and commoners in the city wouldn't be able to bear it and would have a mental breakdown before the war was over. Little Mingyu wasn't in a good mood. She didn't have any reaction after hearing the news of the retreat. "Mingyu, she's fine. Don't worry." Ning Chen rubbed the little girl's hair and comforted her. These days, Mingyu was the one who suffered the most. Between him and Fan Lingyue, little Mingyu was indeed troubled. "Can you stop fighting?" Mingyu was a little depressed. Today, she saw Sister Lingyue and the bad guy get injured. She felt very uncomfortable. Both of them were the people who treated her the best in the world. Why did they have to fight to the death? Ning Chen sighed in his heart. He couldn't answer. There was no room for reconciliation between him and Fan Lingyue. Fan Lingyue had her own stubbornness, and he also had people he wanted to protect. Their standpoints were different, so reconciliation was impossible. Today's life and death battle was just the beginning of their war. In the future, it would only get more and more tragic until one side fell. Fan Lingyue's intelligence was already troublesome enough. Now that she displayed her unparalleled strength, it was really troublesome. Under the Xiantian realm, this woman was almost invincible. Even if a Xiantian wanted to kill her, it wouldn't be that easy. That lustrous white brilliance was too strange. It could remove a person's true qi, making it so that the opponent couldn't use their strength. Before the battle even started, they had already lost. He had encountered so many experts before, but he had never been suppressed like today. He didn't even have the slightest chance to resist. Moreover, Mu Qingshue's arrival gave Fan Lingyue another powerful helper. Although Marquis Bloodclad could restrain him, the other side still had Si Mingjian and Jian Luiying. Once their injuries recovered, the situation would become even more unfavorable for them. Now, even Sword City had begun to openly help Northern Meng. The trend of the world attacking Great Xia was already unavoidable. It could be said that Great Xia had reached its most dangerous moment. To the north was Fan Lingyue, to the west was Eternal Night Cult, to the southwest was Du Yi Temple, to the southeast was Meniang Country, and to the east was Sword City. Apart from the barbarian dynasty in the south and Jinji Country in the northeast, all the borders of Great Xia had entered war. What was worse was that Great Xia was now in the critical period of changing the throne. If it wasn't handled well, there was a high possibility of a mutiny. This also caused the military forces around the imperial city to not dare to move, further worsening the situation of Great Xia. In the next 3 days, Ning Chen and Fan Lingyue were recuperating. The two armies were also relatively quiet, waiting for the next order. However, at this moment, bad news came, causing Great Xia to fall into a state of panic. Marquis Wangchuan had died, and the dean was seriously injured. The sudden bad news caused the injuries that Ning Chen had suppressed with much difficulty to erupt again. He vomited a mouthful of blood and fainted. Great Xia was finished. This was Ning Chen's last thought before he fainted. No one expected that the person who shouldn't have appeared at the southeast border of Great Xia, the Golden Staff State Preceptor of Northern Meng. In this world, all Xiantian realm experts had pride. However, this saying was so laughable when it came to the Golden Staff State Preceptor of Northern Meng. As an Xiantian realm expert of the Three Disasters State, the Golden Staff State Preceptor first killed the Marquis of Wangchuan in secret without caring about his reputation. Then, he launched a sneak attack during the battle between the abbot of Du Yi Temple and the dean, severely injuring the latter. Ning Chen's prediction quickly became reality. In the next few days, the situation of Great Xia took a turn for the worse. Tens of thousands of disciples of the Buddhist kingdom walked out of Du Yi Temple. Under the lead of the abbot of Du Yi Temple, all of them stepped into the territory of Great Xia. The monks of the Buddhist kingdom, who had a Xiantian realm expert of the Three Disasters State, broke through several lines of Great Xia's defense lines like a hot knife through butter, and rapidly advanced north under the banner of slaying demons. The Xiantian realm experts of the Three Disasters State were too terrifying. With a raise of their hands, the sky collapsed and the earth caved in. This was completely beyond the imagination of the people of the world. It was simply not something that could be stopped by human strength. One day later, Ning Chen slowly woke up. Dragging his injured body, he picked up a brush and wrote a letter to Zhang Sun. The content of the letter was very simple. Abandon the first prince and pick one of the two remaining princes to inherit the throne immediately. As for the other prince, if he could trap him, then trap him. If he couldn't, then let Zhang Sun do as he saw fit. The soldiers surrounding the imperial city of Great Xia could no longer remain silent. Even if there was a mutiny and a bloodbath in the imperial city, they had no choice. If these soldiers didn't move, Great Xia would really be finished. Chapter 112. The letter was quickly sent to the imperial palace. Within a day, it had reached Jiang Xuan's hands. Ning Chen had been waiting anxiously in the city. He had fought with the disciples of Du Yi Temple and knew how difficult it was to deal with them. Now that there was a Xiantian expert leading them, the southwest defense line of the Great Xia would not last for long. On the second night after the letter was sent, Ning Chen still did not receive a reply. While he was anxious, Zhang Sun unexpectedly arrived. Qi Ning was beside Zhang Sun. She looked tired. Even for a ninth-grade expert, it was not easy for her to bring someone along. When Zhang Sun arrived, Ning Chen was sitting on the bed drinking medicine. When he saw Zhang Sun enter, he was stunned and quickly got off the bed to greet her. "All right, don't move around when you're injured." Zhang Sun reached out to stop him. "Your Highness, why are you here?" Ning Chen did not understand. Some things can't be explained clearly in a letter. After saying that, Zhang Sun sat on the edge of the bed and glanced at little Mingyue who was fast asleep on the other bed. She asked, "Are you going to keep him with you all the time?" "Yes." Ning Chen nodded and did not explain. Zhang Sun did not ask any more questions and changed the topic. "The Southwest incident was my miscalculation. I have already read your letter. The situation in the Imperial Palace is a little troublesome now. It is not easy to appoint a new emperor." "What do you mean?" Ning Chen frowned. With the three dukes and Zhang Sun, how could this matter not be decided? A trace of helplessness flashed across Jiang Xuan's face. She replied, "The three dukes have different opinions. Duke Taisha does not like the 10th prince, while Duke Shiyu insists on his views and is unwilling to back down. As for Duke Jingwu, he hopes that the 3rd prince will succeed the throne. Without the agreement of the three dukes, the matter of the new emperor can only continue to wait. What time is it now? Why are they still dawdling?" Ning Chen's tone was very irritated. However, there was no other choice. The choice of the new emperor had to be careful. If another incapable ruler like Xia Rui appeared, the Great Xia would be completely finished. After a moment of silence, Ning Chen continued to ask, "What about the 1st prince? Did he say anything?" In the Xia palace, the only person he felt guilty towards was Xia Zi. This prince had once saved him, but he had suggested to his eldest grandson to give him up without hesitation. Zhang Sun shook her head and sighed softly. "Zi didn't say anything. He only said that he would respect my choice. Regardless of whether the 3rd prince or the 10th prince succeeded the throne, he would do his best to assist." Hearing this, Ning Chen's heart was indescribably complicated. The crown prince of the Xia dynasty was a true gentleman. His righteousness was admirable. Unfortunately, such a person was born into the wrong royal family. I'm unable to interfere in the matter of the new emperor. Only you can make your own decisions. However, this matter really can't be delayed any longer. The soldiers around the imperial city must be mobilized. Ning Chen looked at Zhang Sun and suddenly thought of something. "Empress, how many Xiantian pills are left in the palace?" "2. What's wrong? Why do you ask?" Zhang Sun was puzzled. There were originally 3 Xiantian pills in the palace. One of them should have been given to eunuch Pei by the Xia emperor. The other 2 were in the dark hall behind the heavenly mandate hall. Only she and the 3 dukes knew the layout of the mechanism. "Sister Qing Ning, if you were given 1 Xiantian pill, how confident are you in breaking through to the Xiantian realm?" Ning Chen asked. "Less than 40%, Qing Ning replied honestly. "What if there were 2? Ning Chen frowned and asked again. 60%, Qing Ning replied. At this time, Zhang Sun roughly understood what Ning Chen meant. A trace of hesitation flashed through her eyes. There were only 2 Xiantian pills left in the Xia dynasty. Although she was the empress, it wasn't good for her to make decisions on her own. "Empress, you have to bear some responsibility. Apart from Sister Qing Ning, I don't trust anyone else, Ning Chen said seriously. I understand. Zhang Sun nodded. She shouldn't hesitate anymore. Even if someone was dissatisfied with her, she had to bear the responsibility. Currently, the Xia dynasty's top fighting force was weak. They really needed a new Xiantian expert. If possible, it would be best for Empress to invite Eunuch Pei as well. One more Xiantian expert is always one more force, Ning Chen suggested after thinking for a while. Although Eunuch Pei had wanted to kill him before, he couldn't care so much now. The situation in the Xia dynasty didn't allow him to think about anything else. I will try my best, but there isn't much hope. After His Majesty was buried in the imperial mausoleum, Eunuch Pei followed him to keep watch. It's very likely that he won't come out again in this lifetime, Zhang Sun nodded and said. Ning Chen couldn't do anything about this. He wasn't omnipotent and there were things he couldn't do. Eunuch Pei had followed Emperor Xia all his life. Apart from Emperor Xia, he wouldn't listen to anyone else's orders, including Zhang Sun and the three dukes. What do you think if I send you to the southwest? Zhang Sun suddenly asked out of nowhere. Ning Chen had a headache. He couldn't be sent to the Xia dynasty like this. He wasn't a firefighter. He couldn't be sent wherever there was a problem. What about here? Ning Chen asked tactfully. I will send Marquis Taiping to continue the negotiations. With 2 marquises here, we should be able to buy some time, Zhang Sun replied. How many soldiers can you give me? Ning Chen asked after thinking for a while. This was what he was most concerned about. If there were too many, then he would go. If there were too few, then goodbye. 5,000 imperial soldiers, Zhang Sun replied. 5,000. Ning Chen almost jumped up. Why didn't you go fight yourself? Weren't you just sending him as cannon fodder? Those were 10,000 disciples of the Buddhist kingdom, not some random cat or dog. Moreover, their leader was a monster in the 3 disasters realm. Only 5,000, Zhang Sun said very seriously. Although the cities in the southwest also had guards, Ning Chen was only in charge of these 5,000. I'm not going. Ning Chen refused without hesitation. He hadn't lived long enough and didn't want to throw his life away. You have to go even if you don't want to. Do you think I'm discussing this with you? Zhang Sun snorted. At this moment, Ning Chen finally understood why Zhang Sun had come personally. She had calculated that he would definitely refuse. Writing a letter was completely useless. Your Highness, 5,000 really can't fight. Ning Chen said bitterly. He knew that he could use gunpowder to blow things up, but it wasn't always useful. At the very least, that Du-Yi temple's abbot definitely couldn't be blown up by gunpowder. Do your best to stall. As long as you can stall for a month, reinforcements will arrive, Zhang Sun advised. Really? Where would Great Xia get reinforcements? Ning Chen's face was full of doubt. He didn't believe it at all. If I say there will be reinforcements, then there will be reinforcements. Why are you asking so much? Zhang Sun said impatiently. Ning Chen still couldn't believe it. For the sake of his little life, he asked in a low voice, there will definitely be reinforcements. There will definitely be reinforcements, Zhang Sun confirmed. I want to take the little emperor with me, Ning Chen said after some thought. All right. Zhang Sun nodded. She knew that this matter was very difficult to change. Moreover, having the little emperor by his side wasn't necessarily a bad thing. All right, I'll go, Ning Chen agreed. Zhang Sun had already made her decision. She had only come to inform him, so it wasn't up to him whether he went or not. You leave tomorrow. Within 3 days, whether it's Qing Ning or someone else, even if I have to throw away my face as the Empress, I will still fight for a Xiantian level expert for you. However, you have to do your best for me. No matter what, you have to stall for time until reinforcements arrive, Zhang Sun said solemnly. Okay. Ning Chen nodded. He would do his best. Zhang Sun had helped him so many times, so it was time for him to repay her. Alright, I'm leaving. I will quickly resolve the matter of the imperial city. You don't have to worry. After saying this, Zhang Sun looked deeply at the youth in front of her, then turned and left. Be careful. Qi Ning only said 2 words before leaving with Zhang Sun. After the 2 of them left, Ning Chen closed his eyes weakly and leaned against the headboard. He knew that Zhang Sun had been forced to do this because she had no other choice. Great Xia no longer had any capable generals. To put it bluntly, he was sending the 5,000 imperial guards to their deaths. As for whether anyone could return alive, no one knew. In this world, only Zhang Sun would be so rude to him, even if it meant sending him to his death. To be honest, he wasn't confident that he could stall for a month. Although the imperial guards were all martial artists, ordinary warriors could deal with the Buddhist kingdom's disciples. Furthermore, soldier against soldier, general against general. He still didn't know how to stall Du Yi Temple's abbot. His sword was still far from being able to come into contact with a 3 calamities realm Khanate expert. Zhang Sun said that she would send him a Khanate expert, but it wasn't of much use. The Buddhist kingdom's indestructible Vajra body could be said to be difficult to injure. It was impossible for a 5th tribulation Khanate to injure Du Yi Temple's abbot. Unless this 5th tribulation eminence was King Yen. Unfortunately, Senior still had to guard the imperial city to prevent shameless people like Imperial Preceptor Golden Staff from sneaking an attack. The night passed in silence. At dawn, Ning Chen walked out of his room with the confused little Mingyue and walked towards the southern city gate. The 5,000 imperial guards were ready to set off. 2 imperial guard leaders stood respectfully at the front, waiting for orders. Are you ready? Asked Ning Chen as he walked forward. We await Marquis' orders at any time, said the 2 imperial guard leaders solemnly. Ning Chen sighed inwardly and ordered, let's go. The next moment, the city gate opened. The horses galloped south in a grandiose manner. Marquis Bloodrobed stood in front of the city and sent them off silently. He knew that it would be difficult for them to meet again after this farewell. Where are we going? Asked Mingyue. Southwest of Great Xia, replied Ning Chen. War? Continued Mingyue. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. There are so few people. Mingyue could tell the problem at a glance and curled her lips. We have to fight even if there are few people. There's no other way, said Ning Chen softly. After Ning Chen left 50 kilometers, Fan Lingyue received the news. After thinking for a moment, she still didn't send anyone. She understood Ning Chen, so she had never been too worried about Mingyue's safety. However, once Mingyue fell into the hands of others, her outcome was unimaginable. If she didn't have a foolproof plan to save Mingyue, she didn't dare to take the risk. Ning Chen had to die, but it had to be after saving Mingyue. This order couldn't be reversed. Chapter 113. The banners fluttered in the wind as the 5,000 Imperial Army soldiers marched towards the southwest at an astonishing speed. The situation in the southwest was very urgent and the remaining defense line could not hold on for much longer. Ning Chen did not dare to delay. As long as the troops could hold on, he ordered them to continue their journey. The Great Xia's territory was very large. It would take at least a month to travel from Beichue City to the southwest border of the Great Xia. However, the Imperial Army soldiers were all warriors and were much faster than ordinary people. Ning Chen was still injured, so he brought a lot of medicine. There were many elixirs in the army and he basically ate them as if they were his meals. On the 3rd day, in the Weiyang Palace of the Great Xia, a green pillar of light shot into the sky. The shocking scene shocked the world. Now that the world was attacking the Great Xia that had been invincible for 1,000 years was showing signs of decline. It was like duckweed in the rain, about to be completely submerged at any time. Although this green pillar of light did not mean that the Great Xia could turn the situation around, it at least gave the people of the Great Xia a glimmer of hope. The heavens had not completely abandoned the Great Xia, and the Empress in the palace was still working hard for the survival of the Great Xia. Ning Chen looked at the green pillar of light and was silent for a long time. He knew that Qing Ning had broken through to the Xiantian level. Back then, it was Qing Ning who brought him to the Weiyang Palace. He had always been afraid of Zhang Sun and had the best relationship with Qing Ning. Today, seeing her break through to the Xiantian level, he could not feel happy. He wanted to stop those monks from the Buddhist kingdom and needed a Xiantian level expert. However, it was actually a suicide mission. Qing Ning had broken through to the Xiantian level at this time. The candidate would definitely not be anyone else. Ning Chen sighed in his heart. He really did not want Qing Ning to die with him. Zhang Sun needed someone he could trust. If he and Qing Ning died, what would Zhang Sun do? He had never blamed Zhang Sun for pushing him to the southwest border to die. In this world, the person who was fiercest to him was Zhang Sun, but the person who treated him the best was also Zhang Sun. Zhang Sun had done everything an elder could do. He had beaten, scolded, and punished him. However, when Emperor Xia wanted to kill him, Zhang Sun still stood up to protect him regardless of the consequences. In his days in the imperial palace, he had caused as much trouble as he had done meritorious deeds. However, in the imperial palace, meritorious deeds and demerits could never be offset. Once he made a mistake, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. He had snuck out of the palace, faked Zhang Sun's edict, and even defied the edict without returning. Zhang Sun was angry, but he only grounded his feet and did not even flog him. The only time Zhang Sun was really angry was because he secretly made a deal with the 9th princess behind her back and tried to join the wedding procession. That time, he was in the wrong. However, at that time, the old eunuch who was killed by Mu Qingxue was fished out. He was indeed frightened and wanted to escape at all costs. In the end, he angered Zhang Sun. He knelt for 3 days. Zhang Sun was so angry that she threw the teacup on his forehead, causing his face to bleed. Even so, Zhang Sun still secretly asked Xia Miaoyu to take care of his safety. Otherwise, Xia Miaoyu wouldn't even have time to pay attention to him. To him, Zhang Sun was the best senior in the world. This time, in a situation where someone had to die, Zhang Sun chose him, and it could only be him. There was nothing to complain about. This was a matter of course. When night fell, Ning Chen ordered the procession to rest for the night and continue the journey in the morning. When the moon was high in the sky, a green light flashed across the sky and shone brightly. Qing Ning had arrived. Her elegant face was as beautiful as before. Her long hair danced in the wind. She stood in the void, giving people the illusion that she would leave at any time. Ning Chen did not like this feeling, so he waved his hand. "Come down." Qing Ning landed and walked in front of him. She said, "Her Highness asked me to help you." Since she was already here, Ning Chen knew that he could not change anything. Although, he hoped that it was old eunuch Pei who came. "Prince Yan asked me to give this to you." Qing Ning waved her hand and a light yellow sword appeared. It was the sand sword she took from northern Meng. The only change was that this sword had taken form. Prince Yan's vital essence is in the sword. However, you only have one chance to use it. You must use it carefully. Ning Chen took the sword and felt an unprecedented power flowing in the sand sword. It was as vast as the sea, and he could not see the bottom of it. When he injected his vital essence, the sand sword immediately turned into sand and changed its shape according to his will. Ning Chen kept it in his sleeve. This sword came at the right time. It would be of great use at a critical moment. The night was getting darker. Other than the soldiers on night watch, everyone else had already gone to sleep. However, a certain person was unwilling to rest. Qi Ning had just broken through to the Xiantian realm. She had an aura around her that Ning Chen hated the most. Mu Qingxue had already forgotten about him. He was afraid that Qi Ning would be the same. That was why Ning Chen didn't cultivate, heal, or sleep that night. All he did was talk to Qi Ning for the entire night. Qi Ning did not stop him. She quietly listened for the entire night. When the sun rose, she said, "Not everyone will forget the past after breaking through to the Xiantian realm. You are worrying too much." Ning Chen awkwardly rubbed his nose. Wasn't he just scared? 2 days later, Qi Ning could finally withdraw her aura completely and return to her original state. Ning Chen secretly let out a sigh of relief. The group had already traveled more than half of their journey. They should be able to reach their destination in 3 days. Ning Chen ordered the group to rest for half a day again and make some adjustments before continuing on their journey. Martial artists were also human. It was impossible for them to not sleep all the time. Those who did not sleep were all monsters, such as the Xiantian realm. Ming Yu was the only person in the group who did not know martial arts. She had been rushing for days. Her little face was bitter and she was not used to it. Ning Chen's heart ached. The little girl had suffered too much with him. She had been running all over the place. Her days of rest could be counted on one hand. However, this war would take a long time. Little Mingyu was also clear about this. Therefore, she did not say anything. Half a day later, the group continued their journey. The 2 Imperial Guard commanders looked more and more serious. They were both rank 9 late-stage experts. Although they had not reached the peak, they were not far from it. However, they knew very well that they were going to die this time. Rank 9 late-stage experts were nothing in the Buddha kingdom. It was said that there were 4 protectors of the Buddha kingdom under the abbot of Du Yi Temple. Each of them was at the peak of rank 9. No one below the Xiantian realm could defeat them. As the Imperial Guard commanders, they naturally knew some things that the commoners did not know. Marquis Jiming was the most trusted person of the Empress. Now, even Marquis Jiming was sent to his death by the Empress. One could imagine how dangerous the situation was. The soldiers of the Great Xia were pinned down by various battlefields. In addition, they had suffered several losses. They were already stretched thin and could not be compared to the past. The Great Xia was a centralized dynasty. There were not many guards in each city. The main military force of the Great Xia was concentrated in the hands of the 10 Marquis and the imperial court. The rebellion of the 7 cities had been brewing for a long time. In the end, only 250,000 soldiers were gathered. The 3-day journey passed quickly. The atmosphere in the group gradually became serious. They had finally arrived at the southwest border of the Great Xia. They could vaguely hear the flames of war in the distance. The 5,000 imperial guards had set up camp and were making their last rest. The night was shrouded in darkness. It was like a hopeless situation that would never be lit up. Ning Chen stood on a high ground and looked at the flames of war in the distance. Thoughts flashed through his cold eyes. Marquis. 2 Imperial Guard commanders stepped forward and respectfully bowed. They asked with anticipation, "Marquis, can we really do it?" In front of the tent, figures walked out one by one. Their eyes were also filled with a trace of confusion and hope. Ning Chen turned around and looked at these different faces. His thoughts were very complicated. He knew that from today onwards, the lives of these 5,000 imperial guards were in his hands. "Are you afraid of death?" Ning Chen calmly asked. The 5,000 soldiers in front of the tent were startled. They looked at each other. In the end, someone said in a low voice, "Yes. I'm also afraid. Perhaps I'm even more afraid than you," Ning Chen honestly said. Hearing these words, panic flashed through the eyes of the soldiers. They did not know what to do. Ning Chen looked in the direction of the great Xia imperial city and said in a low voice, "In this world, there is no one who is not afraid of death. If you're afraid, I'm also afraid. I've always believed that people who do not fear life do not deserve to live in this world. You are all humans. Being afraid of death is your nature. There is nothing to be ashamed of. Buddha speaks of the afterlife, but I have never believed in Buddha. I only believe in myself, and I only believe in this life. The Empress has saved my life and protected me. In this life, I will repay her kindness. Even if I die, I will not regret it. In this life, people must have their own beliefs. Perhaps they are even more important than their own lives. I have them, so even if I'm afraid of death, I still came. As for whether you have them or not, that's up to you. I won't die for nothing, and I won't let you die for nothing. However, I cannot promise that you will all return alive. The Empress has ordered me to stop the Buddhist kingdom for a month. In this month, I will not say anything about leaving if you're afraid of death. Even if you all die in battle, I will not give the order to retreat. Similarly, if I die in battle first, you cannot retreat. Tonight, think about it carefully. If you feel that you have unfinished business, write it down and bury it here. In the future, if you live, help the dead complete their wishes. Alright, go back to your tents and rest. After saying that, Ning Chen waved his hand. This was all he could say. As for the rest, they had to think about it themselves. The imperial army of Grand Xia represented the final strength of Grand Xia. They could lose, but they couldn't lose. If they lost, it would just be a war. If they lost, it would be the belief of Grand Xia. The battlefield had always been the burial ground of heroes. In the past 1,000 years, countless martyrs of Grand Xia had chosen to sacrifice themselves to protect the safety of the people behind them. That was how Grand Xia had flourished for 1,000 years. No matter how strong a dynasty was, it was impossible for it not to be defeated. The reason why Grand Xia was invincible was because no matter what, the martyrs of Grand Xia had never lost their belief. The words of the general of the northern plains, written in blood, were still fresh in their minds. This was the eternal soul of Grand Xia. From now on, I give up my blood and bones. May the heavens take pity on me. I hope that after I die, I will become a soul of war and protect the territory of Grand Xia forever. Chapter 114. The last night was spent in sleeplessness and deep thought. Scrolls after scrolls were buried under a tree in front of the barracks by the soldiers. From then on, they waited for the survivors of the battlefield. The 5,000 imperial guards continued forward without any regrets. Ning Chen walked at the front of the army and glanced at Qing Ning beside him. A trace of guilt flashed through his eyes. Don't think too much. This is the path I chose. It has nothing to do with anyone else, said Qing Ning calmly. Ning Chen sighed inside. Qing Ning didn't have to come. This was the first time he felt so powerless. In front of absolute power, all his schemes were useless. However, he couldn't just sit there and wait for death. He had lived 2 lives, so he had to gamble everything he had learned. Before he died, he had to pull this group of fake Buddhas into the seamless abyss. Thinking of this, Ning Chen turned and asked, Sister Qing Ning, does the abbot of Du Yi Temple have a weakness, or a relative weakness? Qing Ning was silent. After thinking for a long time, she slowly said, it's said that people who cultivate the indestructible Vajra body will become heavier with each passing day. Speed might be the only thing lacking. However, the abbot of Du Yi Temple is in existence in the 3 calamities realm. No matter how slow he is, he's still much faster than all the other Hotian experts. Hearing this, Ning Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said, if we fight, how long can you last if you only avoid the battle? Qing Ning didn't understand. She was puzzled. I've never fought before, so I'm not too sure. However, I should be able to last 10 moves. What do you want to do? Nothing. I'm just asking. Ning Chen shook his head. 10 moves wasn't much, but it was enough. He needed an opportunity. The abbot of Du Yi Temple was too powerful. When they fought, one of them had to be able to protect themselves. Since he couldn't do it, it was the same if Qing Ning could. After walking for a short while, a surging river appeared in front of them. An Imperial Guard commander stepped forward and respectfully said, "Marquis, the Nanli River is up ahead. After that, we won't be far from the monks of the Buddhist kingdom." The river was very fast, but it wasn't very wide. There were dams along the way, and there was a bridge every 50 kilometers. This was built to make it easier for the commoners to cross the river. Back then, the Great Xia had spent a lot of money and manpower to build it. The group walked on the bridge, passing by one group after another. Ning Chen looked at the river behind him and narrowed his eyes. Then, he continued to rush forward. After walking another 15 kilometers, they could see a majestic city in the distance, Gulan City. It used to be the territory of Great Xia, but now, it had changed hands. The people of Great Xia didn't believe in Buddhism. After the war, most of them became refugees and were exiled to various places. The once invincible Great Xia couldn't even protect its own people today. It was truly a tragedy. The current ancient Orchid City had already become the holy land of the Buddhist kingdom. Many of the Buddhist kingdom's believers had rushed over from the Buddhist kingdom one after another to continue worshipping their Buddha. The abbot of Du Yi Temple was a Buddha in the mortal world, a supreme god in the Buddhist kingdom. Naturally, he would have a large group of Buddhist disciples worshipping him. The 10,000 Buddhist kingdom's disciples recuperated in the ancient Orchid City for several days. Although the abbot of the Du Yi Temple was a Buddha in the mortal world and was extremely powerful, since they were in the mortal world, he still had to worry about his own Buddhist children and grandchildren. He could go on without rest, but the Buddhist kingdom's disciples couldn't. After a series of battles, the Buddhist kingdom's disciples also began to suffer casualties. They had no choice but to rest and reorganize temporarily. Ning Chen stood on the high ground and looked in the direction of ancient Orchid City from afar. The majestic city seemed to be right in front of his eyes, but in reality, it was still at least 300 miles away. They were on a higher ground, so they could see more clearly. The 5,000 Imperial Guards and the 2 Imperial Guards leaders all looked at their Marquis. In the future, they would be here to stop the Buddhist kingdom's disciples from continuing north. However, this was too difficult. They were waiting for Ning Chen's orders. Their Marquis was one of the smartest people in the world. If it wasn't for Northern Meng's military advisor, he would definitely think of a way. Outside ancient Orchid City, the vast expanse of fertile land had begun to sprout green. Spring had arrived, and everything was recovering. It was supposed to be the most beautiful time, but because of the war, the people were displaced and became somewhat desolate. Ning Chen stood on the high ground for an entire day without saying a word. It was only when night fell that he came down. The 2 Imperial Guards leaders looked at each other. They really couldn't understand what their Marquis was thinking. After Ning Chen returned to his tent, he picked up his brush and wrote 2 letters. One was sent to the Imperial City with a messenger eagle. The other letter, along with the ink sword in his hand, was given to one of the Imperial Guards leaders. He solemnly said, "You must personally hand this letter to the barbarian king. This ink sword can be used as a token. Go quickly and return quickly." Understood. After receiving the sword and letter, the Imperial Guard's leader immediately set off, not daring to delay for even a moment. For the rest of the time, Ning Chen was still thinking in his tent, weighing every detail. At this time, he couldn't make any mistakes. Qing Ning was in charge of taking care of little Mingyu. The 2 of them had been together for a few days and were already familiar with each other. The only thing that made Mingyu uncomfortable was that she had to constantly pay attention to her identity as a girl. She couldn't let Qin Ning see through her, so she had been trying her best to avoid physical contact. Xiantian cultivators were not like ordinary cultivators. If it wasn't for the first impression and the Zhen Qi that Ning Chen had left in Mingyu's body, this matter would have been exposed long ago. What are you thinking about? It's already been a day and I haven't seen you speak. Qin Ning walked up and asked. Ning Chen thought for a moment and told the truth, I'm going to borrow the barbarian king's path and make a trip to the Buddhist kingdom. With their current strength, it was impossible to stop them. It was better to destroy the Buddhist kingdom's foundation while the Du-Yi temple was not there. He didn't believe that they wouldn't be able to drag the old monk back. Qin Ning frowned. The idea was good, but there was still a big problem. What should we do here? This was what she was most worried about. If the Buddhist kingdom's disciples directly went north as soon as they left, who could stop them? Let the southerly river flood this place. I've observed the terrain here today. The north side is slightly higher than the south side. As long as we blow up a few dams on this side of the southerly river, the river will immediately burst and flood this place. Most of the Buddhist kingdom's disciples have cultivated the Vajra indestructible body. Their bodies are much heavier than ordinary cultivators. After the flood, the land will become swamps or muddy. The old monk is a Xiantian cultivator, so he can cross, but his disciples can't. Ning Chen calmly analyzed. Based on the current intensity of the sun, it would take at least half a month for them to travel to the fastest place after the flood. Even if these monks could think of other ways to bring forward the date, they would have already arrived at the Buddhist kingdom by then. As long as they could lead the old monk and the 4 Buddhist kingdom's guardians back, the pressure on the imperial guards here would be greatly reduced. With the southerly river as a natural barrier, it shouldn't be a problem for them to hold on for the last few days until reinforcements arrived. The only pity was that the tens of thousands of acres of fertile land in front of them would basically be wasted after the flood. However, at this time, they couldn't care so much. How many people are you going to take with you? Qin Ning asked directly when she heard the plan. 1,000. Ning Chen thought for a moment and said. Isn't that too little? Qin Ning frowned again and asked. It's enough. Ning Chen answered. He knew very well that the people who went to the Buddhist kingdom this time were basically doomed. It was very likely that none of them would come back. No matter how many people he took, it would be suicide. Moreover, it wasn't enough to deal with the abbot of Du-Yi temple with more people. At dawn, the imperial guard leader had already arrived at the barbarian imperial palace. After delivering the ink sword, he was summoned by the barbarian king not long after. The imperial guard leader handed over Ning Chen's handwritten letter and then stood quietly in the hall, waiting. The barbarian king read the letter and his rough and mighty face changed several times. This brat was extraordinarily bold. He actually wanted to enter the Buddhist kingdom through him. Borrowing the passage was no big deal, but he couldn't let this brat off so easily. Go back and tell your Marquis that I want a city as the price for borrowing the passage. I think Tianfu City is a good choice. The barbarian king mercilessly demanded an exorbitant price. The imperial guard leader's eyelids twitched. This barbarian king's appetite was too big. I'll report this to the Marquis when I return. Goodbye. The imperial guard leader cupped his fists and then turned to leave. Bring a messenger eagle back. I'm sure your Marquis and I will have a lot to talk about. The barbarian king smiled faintly and reminded him. The imperial guard leader nodded and immediately left. Half a day later, the imperial guard leader returned to the imperial guard camp in front of Nanli River. After seeing Ning Chen, he repeated the barbarian king's request word for word. Go back and rest. Ning Chen waved his hand and didn't say anything else. The barbarian king's condition was pure nonsense. He wouldn't agree and didn't have the right to agree. Dividing the territory was a taboo of the imperial court. Even Zhangsun didn't dare to open his mouth. Negotiations couldn't be settled in one go. Not long after, another letter was sent to the barbarian imperial palace by messenger eagle. The content of the letter was even simpler this time. From beginning to end, it only expressed one meaning: wake up, stop dreaming. Moreover, at the end of the letter, Ning Chen intentionally or unintentionally mentioned that if negotiations failed, he would seriously consider going to the barbarian palace personally. After reading the letter, the barbarian king was extremely unhappy. He knew this kid was threatening him. In this world, the person he didn't want to see the most was Ning Chen, especially in the barbarian palace. This was because once Ning Chen came, a man would most likely leave with him. His daughter had grown up and was already starting to side with outsiders. He was very helpless. The barbarian king replied and severely reprimanded Ning Chen's shamelessness. In the end, he proposed a condition that made many concessions. He wanted the merchants of the barbarian dynasty to be exempted from customs duties for 10 years. When Ning Chen received the letter, Zhang Xuan's reply had also arrived. There were only 4 words in the letter: deal with it as you see fit. This was Zhang Sun delegating power to him. When a general was abroad, military orders had to be obeyed. It was impossible for him to have time to ask for instructions every time. These 4 words could be said to be the greatest support for him. The barbarian king's request wasn't too excessive. After thinking for a moment, Ning Chen replied and agreed. He didn't have much time and couldn't waste it here. The messenger eagle flew to the barbarian palace. When it returned, it brought a gold medal. In the tent, Ning Chen, who had been waiting for a long time, suddenly stood up after receiving the gold medal. Now that everything was ready, he could finally set out. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.